Chapter 80. The death rate of the lizards increased rapidly. The black iron and bronze-ranked green lizards were the first to escape, and the rest of the group began to flee. The fat ball flying fish chased after them relentlessly. One of the lizards panicked and ran all the way to where Jinjin and the others were hiding. Jinjin had no choice but to jump out and use the sandao to slash at the same spot on the lizard's neck, killing it instantly. "Let's go." Jinjin's face was serious as he covered Sang-Soo and ZD to retreat quickly. He was not worried about the lizards, but the fat ball-flying fish. The green lizards could see them, but the human eye could not capture their track. Against an invisible opponent, this was too passive. Although the lizard was killed by Jinjin, the croaking sounds followed closely behind. They were getting closer and closer, and their malice was obvious. It was obvious that the fat ball-flying fish had been provoked into a frenzy. Whether it was lizards or anything else, they were all targets. "Run back to the camp. You'll be a burden to me if you stay here." Jinjin's expression changed slightly as he shouted. Sang-Soo and ZD immediately turned around and ran with all their might. However, the croaking sounds were getting closer and closer. "Damn it, they're too fast. If no one stops them, they won't be able to escape." Jinjin, who was in charge of bringing up the rear, gritted his teeth and suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around and faced the empty sky. He could not see the enemy, so he could not determine the exact location of the fat ball-flying fish. However, Sang-Soo's words just now were still lingering in his ears. "I think I know the reason behind this. The acid green lizard's visual system is similar to many snakes. The higher the heat, the more it can attract the attention of these acid green lizards. These fat ball-flying fish, let's call them that for now, more or less carry heat. We can't see them with the naked eye, probably because their skin has a camouflaging effect, similar to that of chameleons." Even though Jinjin had warned him not to touch his heart core so easily, he knew that he had to be careful. However, in this situation, if he didn't use it, not only would Jinjin's life be in danger, but ZD, Sang-Soo, and the others would also die under the pursuit of the fat ball-flying fish. In the next moment, the core was activated by Jinjin. Jinjin's pupils changed. A human's pupils were round, but now his pupils had become vertical, turning into a kind of earthen yellow, emitting a cold and cruel aura of a wild beast. He now had the eyes of an acid lizard. Jinjin was stunned. The acid lizard's vision was very different from a human's. Its colors were very monotonous, like an oil painting painted by a bad novice. The outline of the food was not clear. The acid green lizard's entire field of vision was pale yellow. The trees were dark green and the lake was dark blue. These 2 points were somewhat similar to human vision. The acid green lizard's body was also green, but it was not as dark as the trees. As for the fat ball-flying fish, every one of them was red. Some were pale red, some were bright red, and some were dark red. "I finally see it." Jinjin felt relieved, and his spirits were lifted. There were a total of 6 fat ball-flying fish chasing after Jinjin and the others. 2 of them were bright red, while the other 4 were pale red. It seemed to be related to the level of life forms. Jinjin took out a wooden dart and it changed again. Bear's arm. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, 6 darts shot out one after another, creating sharp sounds in the air. The 6 fat ball-flying fish were shot down one after another. They seemed to want to dodge, but the darts were simply too fast. Most of the flying fish fell to the ground, but 2 of them were shot to death, but before they died, they self-destructed. The pitch-black fish bones shot out from the self-detonation were like a torrential downpour, enveloping Jinjin. Jinjin found that he could not dodge, so he immediately bent down and hugged his knees and legs, trying to curl himself into a ball. At the same time, he activated his heart core for the 3rd time. Almost in an instant, a red light flashed, and a hard scorpion shell grew out of his body. The pitch-black fish bones shot at the scorpion shell, creating a series of crisp sounds. Zhenjin stretched his limbs and stood up again. He saw a large number of fish bones scattered around his feet. He checked his scorpion shell again, and found that it was intact. My shell came from a silver-rank spear scorpion after all. Zhenjin rushed to the fat ball flying fish's corpse. Almost all that was left of the fat ball flying fish's corpse was a tattered fish skin. The fat ball flying fish was the size of an adult's head, but the skin left behind after its death had been blown apart by the explosion. The largest piece of skin on the ground was only the size of a palm. Moreover, no matter how big or small the skin was, there were small holes all over it. These were the places where the fish bones originally grew. Zhenjin didn't see the fish's eyes, internal organs, and so on. They must have been blown away. Apart from the fish skin, the most abundant thing was the water contained in the fat ball flying fish's body. This was almost boiling water, emitting a strong sulfuric smell that was very pungent. It was temporarily accumulated on the grass, and was quickly seeping into the soil. It was hard to imagine that a fish's body contained boiling water. Zhenjin was enlightened. I know. In the green lizard's vision, the higher the body temperature, the warmer the color. The lower the body temperature, the colder the color. Also, the light red fat ball flying fish should be a normal beast. The bright red fat ball flying fish has reached the bronze rank. Not only were the fat ball flying fish invisible to human eyes when it was alive, their life force was completely restrained, and there was no way to detect it. But after death, Zhenjin could still feel the life force from these fish skins. These life forces were quickly dissipating. After hesitating for a while, Zhenjin activated his heart core to absorb the fish skins and other remnants. After hurriedly cleaning up the battlefield, Zhenjin immediately rushed back to the temporary camp. I have the lizard's eyes, so I can see these fat ball flying fish, but they can't. If they are surrounded, they won't even be able to find a target to attack. Zhenjin was very worried. At this time, a large number of fat ball flying fish were floating in the sky, and more fat ball flying fish were continuously emerging from the lake. The lizards attracted most of the fat ball flying fish. Looking from the lizard's vision, there were densely packed red dots behind them, almost covering the sky. The new school of fish also joined in the pursuit of the lizards. The lizards fled towards the desert, moving quickly. The location of the temporary camp became worse. It was now between the lizards and the lake. The fat ball flying fish swam in the air, and because there were no obstacles, their path was completely straight. This caused the following school of flying fish to pass by the temporary camp. Oh no! Halfway there, Zhenjin noticed this trend and his face darkened. According to his previous experience, these fat ball flying fish would most likely take the initiative to attack Sangsu and ZD after discovering them. I have to lure them away. Zhenjin took out his darts again and shot them continuously. The fat ball flying fish fell to the ground one by one, and many self-destructed before they died. Shark fins flew everywhere, causing more fat ball flying fish to self-destruct before they died. The school of flying fish was attacked, and they croaked loudly. They immediately changed their target of revenge from the lizards to Zhenjin. Seeing that he had successfully provoked the school of fish, Zhenjin fully activated his heart core. From the inside to the outside, red light spewed out. The red light covered his entire body, and his human form quickly collapsed, forming the outline of a spear scorpion. In the next moment, the red light dispersed, and Zhenjin had disappeared, leaving behind only a silver spear scorpion. The school of fish stared fixedly at Zhenjin, witnessing the entire change, but they still rushed towards Zhenjin. Good timing. Zhenjin was overjoyed. He immediately moved his 4 pairs of appendages and increased his speed. The speed of the needle gold was very fast. In fact, the spear scorpion's speed was faster than the lizard's. This had been proven many times in the previous beast fights. Zhenjin turned into a silver spear scorpion. The only trouble was that it was difficult for the golden needle to change its direction while running wildly. Fortunately, the retreat route of the lizards was a large arc. There were very few trees and rocks in the desert oasis, so they could not stop Zhenjin from running. Zhenjin purposely went around the temporary camp, attracting the school of fish that were flying out to catch up with the lizards. As the lizards ran, they suddenly realized that a silver spear scorpion had cut into their group. Hiss! The lizards screamed, and they became even more chaotic due to shock and fear. The lizards around Zhenjin tried their best, trying to distance themselves from Zhenjin. Don't run. Zhenjin stuck closely in the middle of the lizards. He followed wherever the lizards ran. This time, the school of fish in the air behind him felt very comfortable. Because their targets for revenge were all in one place, there was no need to be conflicted. The poisonous fish stings hit the lizards, and they fell one by one. When they hit Zhenjin's body, they made a crisp sound. Zhenjin was still alive and kicking. After Zhenjin gradually got used to running among the lizards, he had an idea. He swung his scorpion tail and stabbed repeatedly. The scorpion tail was slender and had a wide attack range. The lizards could not dodge in time and could only die one by one under the scorpion tail. The dead lizards rolled on the ground a few times due to inertia and lay quietly on the ground as corpses. The school of fish did not take revenge on these corpses. Just like that, under the double attack of Zhenjin and the school of fish, the lizards suffered heavy losses. In the end, less than 80 lizards successfully escaped back into the desert. Taking advantage of the last moment of panic, Zhenjin finally found a chance to escape. He immediately ran back to the temporary camp. There was a battle in the camp. In fact, most of the fat ball flying fish had been attracted by Zhenjin and the lizard. The number of fat ball flying fish left in the oasis was very small, and they were scattered all over the place. Unfortunately, the temporary camp was visited by a few fat ball flying fish. Oh no! Zhenjin's head sank. He saw traces of battle nearby, and all kinds of signs indicated that the battle in the temporary camp had already started and had been going on for a long time. Rushing into the camp, he found the blue-green algae at a glance. Lan Zhao stood in the center of the camp. His hair was disheveled, and his face was still covered in blood. He held a scimitar in each hand, and he raised his head and shouted, "Get lost! Get lost! Get lost! A bunch of rotten fish and shrimps, you want to eat me? Only I can eat you, you can't eat me." As he said that, his ears moved slightly. He suddenly turned around and waved his iron scimitar, accurately hitting a fat ball flying fish. Chapter 81. The fat ball flying fish was killed by Lan Zhao with a single slash. Fortunately, it did not self-destruct. Zhenjin's head shook slightly. He was curious as to how Lan Zhao had determined the fat ball flying fish's location. "Sir." Zidi's voice came from the tent next to him. Bai Ye and Sang Su also poked their heads out of the palm tree tent. They were all hiding in the tent. Even if a normal fish bone was shot out, it would be blocked by the layers of palm tree leaf. Seeing that they were safe and sound, Jin Zhen felt relieved. He focused on the center of the camp and saw that Lan Zhao was injured, with a few fish bones stuck in his body. He was shot by a fish bone, but he didn't die from the poison? Zhenjin was puzzled. He took out a dart and guessed. This means that the poison is relatively mild to the human body. The poison is more effective against lizards? I have to kill these fat ball flying fish immediately. The lizards have been scattered, and most of the fish are returning. If this drags on, the fish will definitely be attracted to the battle here. When that happens, I won't be able to protect the others with my combat ability alone. In this situation, Zhenjin could only take a gamble. The young knight could not discover the fat ball flying fish, but he could mutate. He immediately shifted his position so that Sang Su and the others could not see his eyes. He then narrowed his eyes and activated his heart core. With the help of the lizard's eyes, he immediately discovered the fat ball flying fish in midair. Including the one that Lan Zhao had just killed, there were a total of 5 fat ball flying fish in the camp. The remaining 3 were light red, but one of them was the largest and had a deep red color. It was obviously a dark iron flying fish. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. 5 darts shot out. One of them missed, while the others hit all the flying fish at the same time. The 3 normal flying fish were pierced through, unable to self-destruct in time. But the dark iron flying fish detonated itself at the last moment. With a whoosh, it was as if a storm had covered the entire camp. The force of the fishbone was very strong, and the palm tents could not withstand it. ZD immediately let out a low cry. She had been shot. Zhenjin's head tightened and he hurried over. A black fish bone was stuck under ZD's right shoulder, close to her chest. Sir. ZD looked nervous. Let me see. Zhenjin went into the tent and hugged ZD. He tore a hole in her apprentice's cloak and exposed her wound. On ZD's delicate skin, the pitch-black poison was spreading at a speed visible to the naked eye. This is a black iron-ranked poison. Zhenjin immediately reached out to pull out the fishbone, then lowered his head, pressed his lips tightly against the wound and sucked. At this moment, ZD's pupils shrank as she felt a strong suction force near her chest. She subconsciously reached out to push Zhenjin's chest. But Zhenjin did not move. His whole body and arms were like cast iron, holding ZD tightly in his arms. Just like this, before the poison could spread, most of it was sucked out by Zhenjin. ZD blushed and stammered, "Sir, I have medicine. It can cure this poison." As she spoke, she took out a small glass bottle from her bag. The medicine inside was light blue and slightly viscous. Zhenjin opened the bottle and spat the light blue liquid on the wound, according to ZD's request. The pitch-black poison immediately dissipated when it came in contact with the light blue liquid. The effect was very good. Zhenjin was speechless. The young knight realized his recklessness and looked a little embarrassed. He coughed and said, "That's good. I'll go check on the others." Zhenjin crawled out of ZD's tent to check on the others. Bai Ye and Sang Su had already come out of the tent. They had the antidotes that ZD had given them earlier, but they were lucky that they had not been hit by the last wave of fish bones. Lan Zhao, on the other hand, was in trouble. He had been hit by several dark iron-level poisonous fish bones. He was now half kneeling on the ground, using his sword to support himself. He gritted his teeth and stared angrily, trying to hold on. But soon, a dark look appeared on his face and an extreme dizziness came over him. Lan Zhao could not hold on any longer and fell to the ground with a thud. Bai Ye and Sang Su hurriedly surrounded Lan Zhao and pulled out the fish bones from his body. They poured the light blue liquid on his wound. The poison in Lan Zhao's wound slowly dissipated, but the dark look on Lan Zhao's face became more intense. "It's too late. He's been poisoned too deeply." ZD had tidied up her clothes and came out of the tent to see this scene. "No, Lord Cyanobacteria, you saved our lives. You must hold on," Bai Ye shouted. He forced Lan Zhao's mouth open and poured the light blue liquid in. It turned out that not long after ZD had rushed back to the camp, she had been hit by a fish bone. She had tried many antidotes and found that the light blue liquid had a strong antidote effect on the poison. She immediately distributed the antidote. Even Lan Zhao was given a bottle. Lan Zhao had been curled up in the tent, motionless and ready to die. But when the fat ball flying fish attacked, under the stimulation of death, he gulped down a bottle of light blue liquid. With a roar, he opened the tent and launched a desperate counterattack. Lan Zhao's actions surprised Sang Su and ZD. When they found that Lan Zhao seemed to have the ability to identify the fat ball flying fish's position, they immediately threw their swords to Lan Zhao. Just like that, the crazy Lan Zhao counterattacked in the middle of the camp, attracting the attention of all the fat ball flying fish. Every time a fat ball flying fish got close to Lan Zao seemed to sense it and waved his sword to force the fat ball flying fish back. Just like that, Lan Zao bought precious time and successfully delayed the battle until Zhen Jin came back. It could be said that without Lan Zao's persistence, ZD and the others would have lost their lives. I want to live, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. Please, I beg you, save me. Sir, save me. The dying Lan Zao grabbed Zhen Jin's trousers and weakly begged. People were really strange. Lan Zao wanted to die so badly that he didn't even hesitate to go on a hunger strike. However, when death really approached him, he revealed a strong desire to live. Zhen Jin was moved. Do your best to keep him alive. The young knight ordered in a commanding tone, showing his determination. Although Jin Zhen hadn't been told the whole story yet, he could guess the thrilling battle in the camp at this moment. It was Lan Zao who saved ZD, Baiya, and Sang Su. What touched Zhen Jin's heart even more was that at this moment, he saw himself in Lan Zao. I'll do my best. ZD checked Lan Zao's wounds, opened the small leather pouch at her waist, and started to concoct medicine on the spot. After a dozen breaths, ZD poured the medicine into Lan Zao's mouth. The black color on Lan Zao's face slowly faded, and his wounds turned black again. Black blood flowed out, but Lan Zao's breath was getting weaker and weaker, and he was on the verge of death. I need to concoct more. ZD gritted her teeth. Her forehead was already covered in sweat. Seeing this, she quickly lowered her head and concocted the medicine again. Her hands moved faster than usual. He can't hold on much longer. Baiyu was panicking. Hold on, Zhen Jin said in a low voice. Lan Zao's eyelids twitched, but they slowly closed again. Sigh. Sang Su's eyes dimmed, and he sighed. Let me do it, Baiyu suddenly shouted, and drank the light blue medicine in one gulp. Then, he threw himself on Lan Zao's body, and used his mouth to suck the black blood flowing out of his wound. Stop. Sang Su hurriedly stopped her and reached out to grab Baiyu's shoulder, wanting to pull her up. Using the mouth to suck the poison can indeed reduce the concentration of the poison in the wound, but it's very dangerous and can cause the user to be poisoned. You're just an ordinary person, Baiyu. Baiyu was pulled away a little, but he still half knelt on the ground and shook off Sang Su. He didn't even look back as he shouted, "This is a human life, and it was Master Lan Zao who saved us." He lowered his head again and took a big gulp of the poison. Whoosh 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 on his deathbed, Lan Zao heard the sound of waves again. His vision was blurry, and he saw the light blue sky and the deep blue sea. He saw the yellow sand bumping into him, and then he fell on the sand. Brother, brother, pull yourself together. Huang Zao, who was still a child, shouted, and struggled to pull the young Lan Zao's body to lie on the sand. A colorful pentagonal starfish was lying on Lan Zao's chest. Huang Zao removed the pentagonal starfish, and Lan Zao's poisoned wound was exposed. Huang Zao immediately lowered his head, sucked the poison out of the wound, and then spat out mouthfuls of blood. The pentagonal starfish wasn't highly toxic, but it would make people's limbs go numb, and they wouldn't be able to use strength. The reason Lan Zao fainted wasn't because of the pentagonal starfish's poison, but because of the numbness and drowning. He hadn't been able to breathe for a long time. Lan Zao gradually woke up. Brother! He looked at Huang Zao and murmured. Brother, you're awake. Don't die, I only have you left, brother. The child Huang Zao raised his head, crying and crying. Lan Zao heard Huang Zao's cry and tried to smile. He couldn't speak, but he tried his best to comfort his young brother. But at this time, the sound in his ears gradually changed. He's awake, he's alive. He's not dead. This was Baiyu's voice. Then, Lan Zao's blurry vision became clear. The child Huang Zao disappeared, and in its place was an excited Baiyu with a mouth full of black blood. Lan Zao's heart was empty, but he tried again, trying to smile. He didn't know whether he smiled or not. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak. He wanted to say, "I want to live, I don't want to die. I want to continue living." But in the next moment, he fell into a coma. Chapter 82. 8 days later, Zhenjin and the others came to the boundary between the desert and the forest. This time, they were finally heading in the right direction. They successfully walked out of the desert and returned to the forest area. Taking a step forward, there was a dense forest landscape. Behind them, there was an endless yellow-brown desert. Towering trees rose straight into the sky. The continuous greenery converged into a wall that extended out of sight. The wall isolated the desert from the wind and sand, and the wall contained vitality. Sang-Soo let out a breath of turbid air and took out a sheepskin map from his bosom. He took out a charcoal pen and began to draw lines on the map. Although this place is not the same as the place where I entered the forest last time, the distance between the two should not be far. Lord Zhenjin, I suggest that we don't rush into the forest. Instead, we explore along this boundary until we find the previous place, Sang-Soo suggested while drawing the map with his head down. Zhenjin's eyes flashed as he carefully considered Sang-Soo's suggestion. According to the time calculation, there was still plenty of time before the next teleportation. If they were unlucky enough to be teleported to the desert again, then the more complete the map, the more help it could provide. Indeed, it is necessary to spend some time exploring and perfecting the map. However, I have stayed in the desert for long enough. Let's go into the forest first, Zhenjin said. As soon as he finished speaking, someone beside him cheered. It was like a hunting dog that had been locked up for a long time and suddenly came to the wilderness. It broke free from its reins and ran into the forest in front of them. Ah! The young man who rushed into the forest exclaimed in enjoyment. He raised his head, opened his arms, and breathed in the forest air. He shouted with a hoarse voice, "This is the smell of the forest. How sweet!" Then, he knelt on the ground and reached out to touch the grass, as if he was stroking the hair of his beloved girl. How soft, how dense! He suddenly stood up and threw himself on a tree. He wrapped his arms around the trunk and kissed the bark with his thick black lip. This is where I should be. This young man was Baiya. Baiya was originally the son of a hunter. He grew up in a mountain village and was very familiar with the forest. He had narrowly escaped death and came to the forest from the desert. He felt as if he had returned home. Compared to when he was in the forest, he had changed a lot. His lips had become thicker, like two fish intestines, and his lips were very dark. His voice also became hoarse and unpleasant. These changes were because he had sucked the black poisonous blood from Lan Zeos wound with his mouth in the oasis. Zhenjin had also sucked Zed's wound before, but the young knight's physique was very strong, so nothing happened. Baiya, on the other hand, was just an ordinary person. Although he had taken the light blue potion in advance, there were still very strong aftereffects. Baiya's change was not only reflected in his appearance, but also in his temperament. After going through a life and death experience, Baiya seemed to have opened the door to his heart. He was originally reserved, but now he was open and had transformed into a chatterbox. It was as if he did not say everything he wanted to say, he would feel very uncomfortable and regretful. Baiya, this guy. Everyone laughed. They all understood how Baiya felt. Only Lan Zeo was expressionless. He was at the back of the group, carrying a large number of water bags. Most of these water bags were made from the stomach pouches of the acid green lizard. Only a few of them were clay pots. Perhaps there was a problem with the soil in the oasis, but Sang-Soo's clay pots kept failing. Only a few of them were finished. However, with the combined efforts of the fat ball flying fish and Zhenjin, the green lizards left many corpses in the oasis. When the fat ball flying fish returned to the depths of the lake, Zhenjin brought people to deal with the green lizards. Their flesh was cut into pieces, and their skin was made into leather clothes. The stomach pouches were taken out, cleaned, and sewed into simple water bags. Thanks to Baya's risk and Zidi's potion, Lan Zeo's life was saved. This middle-aged man, who was originally calm and strong, had also undergone a huge change. He became taciturn, unable to say a single word for a day. It gave people the illusion that he had lost the ability to speak. He would only lower his head when responding to Zhen Jin's orders. "Yes, master." "Understood, master." "As you command, my master." Zidi's expression suddenly changed. She took a few steps forward, grabbed Baya's shoulder, and pulled him back. Baya was pressing his cheek against the tree trunk. He turned around and looked at Zidi with a puzzled expression. "Master Zidi?" Zidi pointed at the tree trunk. "You're poisoned." Baya was stunned and dumbfounded. What? Zhen Jin looked at the tree trunk and saw a thin layer of green moss. "Isn't this the green-spotted moss that poisoned me before?" Zhen Jin suddenly understood. Even now, he could still mutate this kind of poisonous moss through his heart core. After that, Zidi collected the moss and made the potion to cure Baya's poison. "Although we return to the forest from the desert, don't forget that we are still on this dangerous and strange island. We can't be careless," Sang Su reminded Baya. Baya's encounter calmed everyone down. The dense trees were like giant umbrellas. They were rooted deep in the ground, and the branches and leaves that grew without restraint blocked the scorching sun. The temperature in the forest was much lower than in the desert. At noon, Zhen Jin and the others did not dare to walk casually in the desert. Most of the time, they hid behind the sand dunes and gasped for breath. But in the forest, they could still travel at noon. This greatly increased the team's exploration efficiency. Zhen Jin walked at the front of the team. 3 iron-feathered birds suddenly descended from the sky. These birds were also the creation of the island's owner. They were only the size of an adult's fist and liked to climb trees. They would jump down from the high treetops and use gravity to charge forward and peck at other creatures. The iron-feathered bird's speed was comparable to an arrow shot from a crossbow. 2 iron-feathered birds rushed toward Zhen Jin, while the last one rushed toward Zidi. Zidi raised her head. Before she could exclaim, she heard a sharp whoosh. Then, the iron-feathered bird that was rushing toward her was hit by a wooden dart and flew away in a straight line. With a bang, the dart was deeply embedded in the trunk of a tree. The iron-feathered bird was like meat on a skewer. Its body was pressed against the tree trunk, motionless. Almost at the same time that the iron-feathered bird died, Zhen Jin held the wooden spear tightly in his left hand. Like a poisonous snake coming out of its hole, he nimbly tapped twice in succession. The 2 iron-feathered birds that were rushing toward Zhen Jin were struck by the spear tip. Their momentum immediately disappeared, and their lifeless bodies fell to the ground powerlessly. The crisis suddenly descended, but was perfectly resolved by Zhen Jin in an instant. Lan Zeo's hand had just touched the hilt of his saber. Baya's hair stood on end and his muscles tensed up. Everything returned to normal. "Wow, wow, wow! Lord Zhen Jin, you are really too powerful. How many times have the iron-feathered birds attacked us? You saved us once again. Your martial arts are simply. Baya shouted, looking at Zhen Jin with shining eyes. Admiration and love overflowed from the bottom of his heart. Concise and refined, simple and unadorned, but always resolute in killing, and outstanding in battle. Sang Su continued Baya's words. Yes, these are the words. Baya looked at Sang Su again. Sir Scholar, you can always say what I want to say the most. Sir. Zidi smiled at Zhen Jin. Lan Zeo was still silent, but his eyes were not calm as he looked at Zhen Jin. After the 5 of them entered the forest, Zhen Jin took the lead and perfectly dealt with many attacks by himself. Originally, everyone was worried that this kind of exploration was too fast, and would increase the risk. However, under the protection of the Golden Needle, any attack would turn into his victory. Hearing everyone's comments, Zhen Jin first controlled his core, and the lizard pupils in his eye sockets turned back into human eyes. Then he turned around and looked at everyone behind him. His handsome face had a smile, and even though his golden hair was covered in dust, it seemed to sparkle, shining brightly in everyone's eyes. After the previous ordeal, my martial arts seemed to have entered a different realm. I can't use fighting energy, and the power of every attack hasn't changed. However, it was as if I didn't even need to think about each of my actions. They were executed very naturally. This way, it seems that the timing of my attacks is much earlier than before. This was actually because Zhen Jin had used the green lizard's eyes to observe all kinds of hidden life forms. For example, although the iron-feathered birds were hiding in the lush foliage above their heads, in the green lizard's vision, they were layers of dark green with a red ball behind them. It was very conspicuous. Therefore, Zhen Jin was able to take precautions in advance. Every time they attacked, Zhen Jin was already prepared, and every time he acted, it was very timely. Of course, the green lizard's eyes were also flawed, and they could not see things clearly. Therefore, after Zhen Jin used it for the first time in the oasis, he improved its usage. Now, he mutated one eye, and kept the other eye in its original human form. Every once in a while, the state of the two eyes would be switched. Because Zhen Jin was walking at the front, and because he narrowed his eyes to observe, the others in the group were kept in the dark. Sang Su muttered, "Perhaps this is the power of the heart?" P.S. I recommend a good book, Xianxia genre, very charming, Tao Seeking the Mortal World. Qin Yi once thought that people who cultivate immortality must be indifferent and peaceful, have no desires, be patient, and be able to withstand temptations. But in the end, he realized that immortality has a human side. The road to immortality is bitter and cold, you and I hug each other to keep warm. Chapter 83. What is the power of the mind? Bai Yu immediately expressed the doubts in his heart. It sounds illusory. Sang Su smiled. I can't train, so I'm not too sure what the power of the mind is. But from what I know, there are many examples of people who can use the power of the mind. The elite warriors of the barbarians who live in the Frost continent mostly have the ability to dodge instinctively. When they are attacked by unseen attacks or when they are ambushed, they have the ability to dodge. According to the research of scholars, the essence of this instinctive dodge is the power of the mind. If this ability is stronger, it can even detect traps. There are many areas of ice avalanche in the Frost continent. There is a very large area of ice with a crucial point of ice avalanche. It is fine to jump and run around in other areas of the ice. But if you step on this point of ice avalanche, the entire ice surface will shatter in an instant. Those who lose their footing often lose their lives. Explorers of other tribes often lose their lives in the areas of ice avalanche, or die from the attacks of magical beasts in the deep snow. But the elite barbarians, when their instinctive dodge ability reaches the level of being able to detect traps, they can avoid them in advance and walk safely in the snow. If this ability continues to improve, the barbarian warriors will not be afraid of being surrounded on the battlefield. They will always be able to rely on their instincts to avoid being caught in a pincer attack. Hearing this, Zhen Jin could not help but have a thought. He remembered how he had once taken the risk to kill a group of lizards in order to save ZD, Sang Su, and the others. Facing a siege, he did not panic. He calmly dealt with all the attacks, dodging the continuous attacks with ease. He was very similar to the barbarians. Sang Su continued, in the wilderness continent, there is a storm sword saint. He is a saint-level fighter. Since he started training, he has only focused on the longsword in his hand. He does not wear armor and does not have any other weapons. He spends almost all of his energy on improving his sword skills. It is rumored that every time he strikes, it is so fast that people cannot see it clearly. His sword skills are extremely simple. Every time he strikes, he can take the life of at least one enemy. This storm sword saint has an extremely high reputation and influence among the beastmen. Many beastmen worship him. That's because the Do-Chi art he cultivates is very ordinary and his bloodline isn't outstanding either. Yet, he was able to reach such a high level. This is the example and hope for most of the beastmen who don't have good talent or good Do-Chi art. The Galestorm Sword Saint once explained to the orcs who came to him for guidance, "Focus on your heart and focus on your sword." People speculated that he had developed the power of his spirit and projected it onto his sword, reaching the legendary state of being one with the sword. "Is there such a person among the orcs?" Baiyu exclaimed. "If that's the case, why are the orcs still unable to raise their heads after being beaten by us humans?" Zhenjin shook his head and said seriously, "Don't underestimate the orcs. Since the beasts were able to dominate the entire wasteland continent, they naturally had many heroes. We may have the upper hand now, but in reality, we've only taken a corner of the wasteland continent. We've only taken down one of the beastkin tribes. The true potential of the orcs has yet to be unleashed." Baiyu was just an ordinary person who had gone to the wasteland continent with the intention of making a name for himself. He wanted to become a knight. There were many people like him. The Empire's political propaganda deliberately weakened the strength of the orcs and promoted the benefits and prospects of war. This encouraged the various classes of the Empire to flock to the wasteland continent. Zhenjin and the Hundred Needles family were among them. However, as a noble, Zhenjin's outlook was much higher than Baiyu's. The middle and lower classes were all optimistic about the future of the human race in the wasteland continent. Almost all of the elites knew that this was only the early stages of the human race's invasion. They had only just gained a foothold. In the future, a true war would be needed to determine the outcome of the war between the two races. The wasteland continent is at least twice the size of the Xingming continent, but it only produced one Galestorm Sword Saint. He's special. His bloodline is the cornerstone of his strength. In terms of overall strength, we humans are far superior to the orcs. ZD expressed her opinion. "We will definitely win this war between the orcs and humans." ZD's optimism about the future was the most common understanding of the human race. She had to win. The Xingming continent had no room for the Wisteria Merchant Guild to develop. If the Wisteria Merchant Guild wanted to expand, the war between the orcs and humans was the best way. Zhenjin did not continue to explain. He realized that as long as he said a little, Song Su would be able to say even more. Song Su's words were more convincing than his own explanation. Baiyu, however, did not let go of this topic. "How can I unlock the power of the mind? I want to become such a person." He did not have an outstanding bloodline and was only an ordinary hunter's son. Miss Sybil did not provide him with any material support. Therefore, Baiyu was very interested in the power of the mind. ZD chuckled. "The Galestorm Sword Saint has already given you the answer to your question. Focus on your sword and your heart. This means that you have to focus all of your attention and energy on one point. So, Baiyu, if you want to learn from the Galestorm Sword Saint, you should first forget about Miss Sybil." "Ah, how can I do that?" Baiyu was stunned and shook his head. Everyone chuckled again. Baiyu heard the laughter and saw the mocking gazes of the others. He realized that he was being made fun of. He rubbed his head, his face flushed red. Despite his embarrassment, Baiyu gritted his teeth and looked at Zhenjin with eyes full of worship, love, and inquiry. "Lord Zhenjin, do you have any insights?" After a pause, Baiyu continued to ask, "You have also grasped the power of the mind, but you are completely different from the Galestorm Sword Saint. You love Lady ZD." Lan Zhao and Song Su both glanced at Baiyu, thinking that Baiyu was really bold. Lan Zhao was a middle-aged man, while Song Su was an old man. Both of them had rich life experiences and understood the gap between the upper and lower classes. If it were them, they would definitely not ask a temple knight for tips on cultivation as an ordinary person. However, Baya was just a young man, and he had very little life experience. It was because of this that he fell in love with the noble Miss Sybil. Baya had the romantic naivety of youth. He was certain that Miss Sybil was waiting for him to become a knight and return home in glory to marry her. And after experiencing so much on this island, he was also facing the threat of death. For all these reasons, he yearned to obtain power. But he also understood the cruel side of reality. He did not have a bloodline advantage, nor did he have any cultivation resources. Thus, although the power of the mind sounded illusory, it had become his only hope. This was also the reason why the Galestorm Sword Saint was so influential and charming. Baya's straightforward words made Zd secretly size up Zhenjin, a hint of shyness in her eyes. Zhenjin coughed and rolled his eyes. Who knows what power of the mind is? He had only been able to reach this step because of the core of heart. But he did not want to continue lying. If he kept lying, there would only be more and more lies. Because as long as it was a lie, it was not the truth, and there would be flaws. Once there were flaws, the liar would have to use another lie to cover up the previous one. But how could there be no flaws in the latter lie? In this way there would be more and more flaws, and in the end, the liar would be reduced to drinking poison to quench his thirst, sinking so deeply that he could not extricate himself. Moreover, to Zhenjin, there was something more important. Lying was against the chivalry. In fact, Zhenjin's lie to cover up his lizard pupils had already put him under a lot of pressure. Thus, he decided to tell the truth this time. Baya, I might have to disappoint you. I am not too sure about the power of the mind. Perhaps it has something to do with my experience. After experiencing so many life and death situations, my mind has been tempered. Ah, I see. Baya's face was full of disappointment. This young man admired and trusted Zhenjin greatly, and did not think that Zhenjin was deliberately hiding anything. Zhenjin wanted to comfort Baya, but after opening his mouth, he did not know what to say. He could only look expectantly at Song-su. Song-su did not disappoint him. The next moment, Song-su said to Baya, Lord Zhenjin's words are very reasonable. Many scholars have analyzed and concluded that the true meaning of the Galestorm Sword Saint's cultivation is to place his life on the edge of a blade. Every battle, and even every cultivation, he has to face death. Under the stimulation of death, he gradually unearthed the power of the mind. And Lord Zhenjin's experiences on the island are similar to the Galestorm Sword Saint's cultivation process of taking the initiative to abandon his armor and fight to the death with a strong enemy. Baya raised his eyebrows, so, in order to unearth the power of the mind, one has to take the initiative to explore and experience the stimulation of death? This is too dangerous, isn't it? Song-su said, so, the Galestorm Sword Saint has taken in many disciples, but he has not nurtured the next Galestorm Sword Saint. Although many excellent seeds have appeared, many more have died young. His cultivation method is too dangerous, and luck plays a large part in it. To this day, there has not been a single disciple who can completely inherit the mantle of the Galestorm Sword Saint. Baya sighed. Hearing this, he could only put away his thoughts. Although Baya was willing to take risks for the sake of obtaining power, he had his own bottom line. Seeking death for the sake of the power of the mind was already below his bottom line. Just like how Zhenjin shouldered the responsibility of reviving the family, Miss Shi-er's love and expectations were both his motivation and his burden to Baya. In the next moment, Baya looked at Zhenjin with even more admiration and respect. Lord Zhenjin, you are truly amazing. You are so young, but you have already grasped the power of the mind. Compared to the Galestorm Sword Saint, you have an even more outstanding bloodline. Among the Holy Knights, you are definitely the most special. To be able to meet you and follow you is truly my honor. Baiya sighed from the bottom of his heart. Zhenjin was speechless. It is not only my honor, but also my hope, Zd continued Baiya's words and looked at Zhenjin, her eyes filled with tenderness and love. Sangsu laughed and said with certainty, Lord Zhenjin's talent is outstanding, and he will definitely have a brighter future than the Galestorm Sword Saint. But what I admire the most is your moral character, Lord Zhenjin. With your words, the 100 Needles family will definitely rise again. Lan Zhao did not say anything. Hearing Sangsu's words, he silently nodded. Like Sangsu, he also recognized Zhenjin's moral character. At this moment, Lan Zhao could not help but think back to the time he had spent with Zhenjin. He and Huang Zhao had knelt on the ground, and Zhenjin had pardoned their sins. This was kindness. Zhenjin had played with the bronze-ranked Alpha Ram in the palm of his hand, and killed the leader of the flying squirrels. This was bravery. Zhenjin had listened many times and accepted the recommendations of Sangsu, Zd, and the others. This was good at listening to other people's opinions. Zhenjin had led the entire team, and when faced with difficult choices, he had resolutely decided to cut wood and make bows, and had successfully hunted the flying squirrels. This was wise leadership. Poisoned, lacking food, being chased by a group of beasts in the desert, and facing so many crises, Zhenjin had always encouraged others. This was determination and optimism. Zhenjin had promised that he would do his best to save everyone. Although there were only 5 of them left in the entire exploration team, this could not be blamed on Zhenjin. He had already done all he could, and he had always fulfilled his promise. This was keeping his word. And what made Lan Zhao feel the most ashamed and admirable was the experience he had heard from Sangsu and Zd. Zhenjin had been in the volcanic cave, and at the most dangerous moment, even when Sangsu had taken the initiative to sacrifice himself, Zhenjin had still adhered to the spirit of a knight, and had not treated others as food. This was such a noble character. No one knew better than Lan Zhao how noble, rare, and praiseworthy this kind of spirit and virtue was to persevere in the face of death. After leaving the volcanic area, in a situation where they had experienced a battle, their stomachs were rumbling with hunger, and in a situation where they were extremely short of food, Zhenjin had still given the remaining lizard and jumping rat meat to Sangsu and Zd. This was compassion for the weak, and sacrificing himself for others. And what moved Lan Zhao the most was that even after knowing his crime, Zhenjin still took pity on him, and did not abandon him. In the end, Lan Zhao decided to live on. Although Zhenjin had not said any comforting words to Lan Zhao firmly believed that the Lord Zhenjin understood him. Looking at the young knight in front of him, looking at his handsome face, looking at his blonde hair, and looking at his elegant and calm smile, the silent Lan Zhao's eyes gradually moistened. What he saw was not Zhenjin, nor was it a temple knight. It was as if he was looking at the sun. In his eyes, in his heart, Zhenjin seemed to be emitting light all the time. This light was not because of Zhenjin's identity as a temple knight, nor was it because of his identity as the sole successor of the 100 Needles clan. It was not a reflection of external sunlight, but rather it was because of his moral character and spirit. He stood there, looking ordinary, but he was a flag that belonged to the knights. This made Lan Zhao want to follow this flag from the bottom of his heart. These days, when night fell, when Lan Zhao rested and faced himself alone, he was also recalling and imagining. At that time, when we found Zd, Sangsu, and the others trapped at the top of the sand dune, surrounded by lizards, my brother and I would have disregarded our own safety and gone to rescue them. Then we would have met up with the Lord Zhenjin. In that case, wouldn't the current situation be different? But at that time, I listened to my brother's words and did not choose to rescue them. Was this a punishment and warning from God, or was this a punishment given to us brothers by fate? Lord Zhenjin, You even saved such a sinful person like me, and did not give up. From now on, I will use all of my strength to follow you, until death do us part. You once saved my brother, but when your fiancé was in danger, Huang Zhao and I both chose to escape and give up. From now on, I will use my life to atone for this choice. Following a person like you, is it possible that, perhaps, it can make my darkness fade away? Can it reduce my sins? Just like how the sunlight can melt away all darkness. After coming out of the oasis, Lan Zhao was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. He had once demoted himself to a slave and declared his loyalty to Jin Jin. But that was only because Huang Zhao had offended someone as important as Jin Jin. For the sake of his brother, Lan Zhao had no choice but to do so. But now, Lan Zhao's silent loyalty was of a completely different nature. This kind of loyalty, because of Jin Pin's noble status, was very little. More importantly, it was because of Zhen Jin's understanding of Lan Zhao that the latter approved of, and Zhen Jin's great kindness in saving Lan Zhao's life and soul. In addition, there was also Lan Zhao's own remorse and guilt towards himself, his attempt to redeem himself, and the motivation to do good that came from the depths of human nature. Lan Zhao looked at Jin Jin expressionlessly, but the emotions in his heart were extremely complex. As his heart surged, his eyes gradually turned red, and his vision became more and more blurry. Jin Jin looked at Bai Ye, Zd, Sang Su, and Lan Zhao, and felt his scalp go numb. These people were all looking at him, and their eyes were full of eagerness, worship, love, tenderness, loyalty, appreciation, and so on. The young knight couldn't take it anymore. What made him feel even more frightened was that Lan Zhao was about to cry on the spot. What does he mean by this? I just told a small lie to pave the way for the future, to hide the core of my heart. Everyone's reaction was stronger than expected, and Zhen Jin felt that he gradually couldn't take it anymore. He quickly shook his head. You think too highly of me. Well, let's not talk about this anymore, let's continue. Zhen Jin turned around and continued to lead the way. Others didn't know, but how could Zhen Jin not know himself? He knew that his ability was actually very limited. He also knew that although he looked very determined on the outside, he was also very hesitant, confused, and worried deep down. He yearned for bravery, but he was also afraid of death. He was a noble, a knight, but at the same time, he was also a normal person. Yes, I almost forgot. Lord Jin Jin still has the quality of humility. Lan Zhao's eyes lit up again. It's hard to imagine that a person of his age, with such achievements, can still maintain a humble and cautious state of mind. This is definitely not an act. I'm sure that this humility comes from the bottom of his heart. I really want to know immediately what great achievements Lord Zhen Jin will achieve in the future. Lan Zhao looked at Zhen Jin's back, and his heart was filled with emotion and endless praise. Chapter 84. The forest was quiet at night. Occasionally there would be the roars of unknown beasts or the chirping of nightingales. Through the gaps in the leaves, one could see the bright moon hanging in the night sky. 3 hammocks had already been built. When they were in the oasis, Zhen Jin had mutated into the spear scorpion leader and hunted a large number of acid green lizards. With the stomach pouches of these green lizards as water bags, Sang Su and the others focused their labor on making hemp rope and coarse cloth. They first made hemp rope of varying thickness, then used the thinnest hemp rope to weave the simplest coarse cloth. Using these coarse cloth and hemp rope, they made hammock. Because there were fewer resources in the oasis and a lot of labor, in the end, Zhen Jin and the others only made 3 hammocks. However, although there were 5 of them, they did not need that many. Every night, at least 2 people were arranged to keep watch. There were 5 people in the small group, so there were only 3 left to enjoy the 3 hammocks. Due to the shortage of resources, the 3 hammocks were the precious collective property of this small group. In the middle of the 3 hammocks there was a burning bonfire. Without the influence of the wind, the bonfire emitted an orange light, occasionally making crackling sounds and sparks. Zhenjin had already checked the surroundings carefully, and there were no signs of poisonous fire bees. Zhenjin had almost lost his life because of the poisonous fire bees, so naturally, he was very concerned about this. However, in reality, even if ZD had informed Zhenjin of the existence of the poisonous fire bees in time, Zhenjin, who had just woken up, would not have had the ability to check the surroundings. Speaking of which, Sang-Soo and Lan Zeo's exploration team did not know about the poisonous fire bees before they met Zhenjin. They had repeatedly started fires in the forest, but they had not been attacked by the poisonous fire bees. They had just eaten dinner, and the 5 of them were very satisfied. At the moment, the group had sufficient food reserves. Even after leaving the oasis, the 5 of them rarely replenished their food and water along the way. They had made a lot of preparations in the oasis. In the forest area, the resources were much more abundant than in the desert, and the worries about food and water in everyone's hearts decreased. Sang-Soo stared at the map in his hand by the bonfire. He was old and his eyesight had deteriorated. He held the sheepskin map in one hand and the lens in the other. He held it close to his eyes. Sometimes, he would look away from the map and mumble to himself, as if he was calculating something. His hands also cooperated, drawing crisscrossing lines on the grass. Sometimes, he would take out a charcoal pencil and carefully add a few black lines on the sheepskin map. The charcoal pencil he used was made from wood that had been charred black at one end and then sharpened. After studying for a while, Sang-Soo raised his head and laughed. He reported to Zhenjin, "Lord Zhenjin, our progress is very fast. According to my estimation, as long as we continue walking, we will reach the place where we entered the forest in 1 or 2 days." This was mainly because of Zhenjin's protection. The speed of the whole group's progress was much faster than Sang-Soo's expectations. "I have some bad news. We don't have much pink medicine on hand," ZD said after hearing Sang-Soo's words while grinding the materials. The materials she was grinding were all collected during the day along the way. They included the feathers and blood of the iron-feathered bird, the green-spotted moss that poisoned Baya, and so on. The resources in the forest were abundant and were not comparable to those in the desert. However, the main material to make the pink medicine was a kind of ore that glowed with heat. This ore was also the food of the monkey-tailed brown bear. ZD did not collect this material. The exploration team needed this pink medicine to mark along the way. By doing so, not only could they prevent people from getting lost in the forest, but it could also serve as a signal for help sometimes. "How long can it last?" Zhenjin asked. ZD had already calculated and answered directly. "According to the most economical method, it can last for 3 more days." Zhenjin nodded slightly. After thinking for a while, he replied, "There's enough time. There's no need to deliberately search for ores. Our first goal is to rush back to our original location." No one had any objections. After this series of events, Zhenjin had supreme authority and influence in this 5-man team. After discussing for a while, Sang-Soo, ZD, and Baya all lay on the hammocks to sleep. Tonight, Zhenjin and Lan Zeo were responsible for keeping watch at the same time. In the desert, 2 people took turns keeping watch at night. One was responsible for the first half of the night, and the other for the second half. However, in the forest, because the trees were overgrown and blocked their vision, it was adjusted to 2 people keeping watch at the same time. The night was getting darker. The forest seemed to be deeper and more terrifying. Predators often moved out at night. This made the danger level of the forest at night far higher than during the day. Lan Zeo's face was full of vigilance. He would react at the slightest movement. Baya and Lan Zeo's recovery and addition greatly reduced Zhenjin's burden. Zhenjin felt energized. Although he had been leading the way all day, he was still responsible for keeping watch at night. This wasn't because his endurance had increased, but because the green lizard's eyes were too useful. Almost all the hidden threats in the forest had nowhere to hide in front of Jinjin. In terms of practical value, the green lizard's eyes are definitely number one. Jinjin felt deeply. If he didn't have the green lizard's eyes, the young knight could only move forward step by step and slowly explore. His mind was always tense, and he was passively on guard against any sneak attack from any direction. With the green lizard's eyes, Jinjin could detect danger in advance. He could take the initiative to control the situation and allocate his physical strength and energy. There was a huge difference between a person's physical strength and energy consumption in a passive and active state. This was a qualitative change. Squeak, squeak. Suddenly, the sound of an animal being attacked could be heard from the forest not far away. Lan Zhao was shocked. His hand, which was always on the hilt of his sword, immediately clenched tightly. But in the next moment, the squeak-squeak stopped abruptly and didn't appear again. Lan Zhao frowned, his expression serious. Without a specific bloodline, Lan Zhao didn't have the ability to see in the dark even though he was a bronze-ranked elite. He could only rely on the weak light of the fire to identify his surroundings. He could only see a ball of darkness a little further away. He couldn't tell if there was nothing in the darkness, or if there were wolves or poisonous snakes lurking in the dark. In the dark forest, scenes of survival hunting and escape were ongoing. The light of the temporary campsite drove away many wild beasts, but it also seemed to attract some existences. There seemed to be something in the darkness of the forest that was getting more and more restless. Sometimes it was the sound of branches being crushed. Sometimes it was a mysterious high-pitched cry. Lan Zhao gradually became nervous. He felt as if something was slowly and quietly approaching the campsite. "I'll go check it out. If something happens, you have to shout immediately." Jinjin opened his mouth and instructed Lan Zhao. "Yes, master." Lan Zhao immediately responded. Jinjin entered the darkness and quickly disappeared from Lan Zhao's sight. He didn't have the ability to see in the dark, so he activated his heart core at this time. His field of vision suddenly changed. The basic color of the forest at night was darker. There was no wind, and the creatures that could move emitted light red, orange, fluorescent green, and other colors. It was more conspicuous than during the day. During the day, Jinjin needed human eyes and lizard eyes to match. But at night, in the pitch-black forest, human eyes were practically useless. Both of his eyes mutated into the pupils of a lizard. Jinjin first patrolled around the campsite a few times, accurately killing a few wild beasts and temporarily eliminating the threats around the campsite. Then, he chose a direction and went deep into the forest. After he was a certain distance away from the temporary campsite, Jinjin slowly stopped his footsteps and began to take off his clothes. He stripped himself naked, then climbed up a tree and carefully placed his clothes in the treetop. Then, he firmly memorized this position. If he forgot, he could only return to the temporary campsite naked. If ZD and Song Su found out in this state, it would be very awkward. Jinjin went to the surface naked and walked a few dozen steps. After he observed his surroundings and confirmed that there was no one else, he began to activate his heart core. Mysterious and strange blood-red magic energy surged out of the heart core and quickly covered Jinjin's entire body. In a ball of red light, Jinjin's human form collapsed like snow under the sun and turned into a lizard. The red light quickly dissipated. Jinjin had disappeared from his original position and was replaced by an acid-green lizard. This acid-green lizard had strong limbs, a long tail and green scales all over its body. Jinjin observed himself. In the green lizard's vision, he could only see a blurry light green outline of himself. "My vision is lower, but it's much higher than the spear scorpion." Jinjin tried to sniff the air and immediately realized that a lizard's sense of smell was far more sensitive than a human's. "There seems to be," The smell of water in the air? He opened his mouth slightly and spat out a huge purple-black snake tongue, successfully making a hissing sound. Jinjin moved his front and back legs, controlling the strong lizard body and walking in the dark forest. Jinjin walked smoothly. Because the green lizard had 4 legs, it felt very similar to a human crawling on all fours. Another reason was that this was not the first time Jinjin had tried to completely transform into a green lizard. Back in the desert, he had done it many times when he was on night watch alone. But there are still many differences between this and crawling on all fours. Jinjin stopped and silently summarized his experience. He turned his head and looked behind him. The biggest difference was behind him, the thick lizard tail. When he transformed into the leader of the spear scorpion, the tail was long and thin, so it did not affect Jinjin much. But when he transformed into a lizard, the lizard tail was thick, heavy, and long. It dragged on the ground and became a hindrance. Especially when Jinjin moved forward on all fours, the lizard tail would sway slightly from side to side. This sway affected Jinjin's balance. The faster Jinjin moved forward, the greater the effect. When the acid green lizard runs, not only do its limbs, torso, and tail work together. Whether it's walking or running, it has a perfect movement rhythm. It's a completely natural rhythm. Lizard larvae that just came out of their eggshells may be very clumsy. But as time passes and they gradually grow up, after experiencing the training of hunting, running away, playing, and other activities, they will naturally master this movement rhythm. But I don't. I'm like a newborn lizard. I've just been born, but I have the body of a mature lizard. Even though I've used the time at night to train many times, I still haven't mastered the correct way to run. Jinjin felt that his tail was a hindrance, but there was nothing he could do. Just like how he had secretly practiced the spear scorpion form, it was still difficult for him to turn at high speed. He was a human after all, and the time he spent in the form of a magical beast was too short. There's water here. Jinjin followed the smell of water and found a small pool. As long as I have enough training, I will definitely be able to master the acid green lizard form at some point in the future. Jinjin encouraged himself in his heart and began to train his tail near the pool. He first swung the thick tail behind him, making the sound of the wind. Then, he began to charge towards a large tree. After brushing past the tree, he swung his tail hard and hit the tree trunk. The tree trunk swayed slightly, and the dense branches swayed even more. The leaves rustled, but not a single leaf fell. Pa-pa-par in a series of sounds, Jinjin used the trees to train his tail. After training for a while, he began to change the way he attacked. He first charged towards a tree, then exerted force on his limbs and changed direction abruptly. Using the inertia of his body, he swung his tail onto the tree trunk. Pa. The tree trunk swayed, and large pieces of bark fell off. The branches rustled as if a strong wind was coming. This attack method was much more ferocious than before. With this kind of attack power, even if it's a charging ranger, I'll be able to send him flying off his horse. That's not right. The lizard's limbs are thick and short. I can't reach the ranger on the horse. Maybe I can try. The moment I swing my tail to attack, I push off the ground with my hind legs and raise my entire body, forming a posture with my head lowered and my tail high. This way, my tail can hit a higher place. Jinjin thought of this and began to try. In the end, he didn't control his strength on the first try. When he swung his tail, his hind legs used too much force and lifted his entire body up. The lizard's back was on the ground. On the second try, he adjusted his strength incorrectly. The upward force was reduced, but the forward force was increased, causing him to plunge into the mud. It was very similar to the posture of a dog falling on its face. Jinjin supported himself on the ground with his 4 legs, spat out mud from his mouth, and then blew air out from his nose. After shaking his head for a while, He finally cleaned up his nasal cavity and mouth. The 2 failures didn't discourage him. Instead, it increased his motivation to continue trying. After a few more tries, Zhen Jin's movements became more and more proficient. But after some thought, he stopped this training program. Although I can hit a higher target, the lower half of my body is in the air, causing the strength of my tail to be much weaker than when I'm on the ground. And the lower half of my body is in the air, giving me a short time to stay in the air. This is too big of a flaw. Zhen Jin was familiar with the way the knights fought. He quickly simulated a scene in his mind. A ranger rushed over. He transformed into a green lizard and rushed forward. When he was close, he suddenly turned his body and swung his tail. The lower half of his body was raised, and his tail was swung towards the ranger. But at the same time, the ranger thrust his spear forward, aiming at the green lizard's butt. Zhen Jin thought of this and didn't want to simulate anymore. Adjusting the way of the tail swing attack just now, Jin immerses himself in practicing hard. Hiss, until Zhen Jin opened his mouth and sucked in a breath of cold air. I think I twisted my tail. A strong pain came from his tail. When he swung his tail slightly, the pain was like a whip full of iron thorns, whipping Zhen Jin's head. In this situation, Zhen Jin could only stop training his tail and start the next training. He squatted on the ground and raised his neck. His Adam's apple suddenly swelled, forming a round lump. The round lump rolled from his neck to his mouth. Zhen Jin opened his mouth wide. Then, in the next moment, a ball of green acid shot out from his mouth. The acid hit a tree unerringly. The thick tree trunk was corroded by the acid, making sizzling sounds and emitting pungent smoke. After a few breaths, a large hole was corroded in the trunk. It could no longer support the lush upper half. With a creak, the tree fell to the ground, making a loud noise. Zhen Jin took a few steps back and continuously shot at the surrounding trees. Almost all of the liquid he shot out hit their targets accurately. Only one of them brushed past the tree bark and landed on a rock. After a few breaths, the affected trees fell to the ground. For a moment, the sound of explosions was continuous. The unfortunate rock, although not small, also turned into nothingness. This was normal. The lizard's acid could even corrode gold stone, let alone this kind of ordinary rock. If it was a silver-ranked green lizard's acid, even a black iron-ranked spear scorpion would die instantly. Only a silver-ranked spear scorpion could resist it. After shooting so many times in a row, Zhen Jin also felt weak. His head drooped, and his spirit was somewhat dispirited. Shooting acid was not the green lizard's usual way of fighting. It was the green lizard's biggest trump card. The green lizard would not use this trump card unless it had no other choice. For Zhen Jin, this long-range weapon was the most suitable for him, because he also had the accuracy talent from the 100 Needles clan. Although he had not practiced much, Zhen Jin's acid was much more powerful than the green lizard's. He would shoot wherever he wanted and almost never missed. After panting for a while, Zhen Jin gradually regained some strength. His whole body conveyed a sense of weakness. His strong limbs felt soft, and the lizard's body became heavy. At the same time, Zhen Jin also felt his mouth dry. His body was dehydrated. The green lizard's body contained a lot of water, which was why it could produce corrosive acid. This also meant that after shooting the acid, the green lizard would enter a dehydrated state. Now, even if Zhen Jin wanted to shoot acid, he could not shoot it out for the time being. Because of the lack of water in his body, the speed of producing acid had dropped to the bottom. Zhen Jin moved his forelimbs and came to the side of the pool. The pool was not deep, and the green lizard did not see any creatures in the water. However, to be cautious, Zhen Jin did not take the opportunity to go into the water and train the green lizard's swimming ability. Zhen Jin first stretched out his snake tongue and licked the water a few times. When he found that there was no problem, he lowered his head and gulped down the water. A large amount of water flowed into his stomach, and then under Zhen Jin's deliberate control, it was stored in the other 3 stomach bags. This really quenches my thirst. Zhen Jin sighed and began to actively control his internal organs, trying to speed up the production of acid. The water stored in his stomach was squeezed out and flowed into the poison sac below his neck, where it began to turn into acid. At this speed, I'll have a full bag of acid after about a night. Like before, it won't be a problem to shoot more than 20 times. Zhen Jin had already discovered that when he mutated from human form into a complete green lizard, the acid reserve in the poison sac was only half. After a few training sessions, he also discovered the technique of shooting acid. Under normal circumstances, the green lizard would shoot its poison out fiercely, but it would often miss. At most, it could shoot 2 or 3 times. However, Zhen Jin only shot out a small amount each time. He deliberately controlled the muscles around him. This way, the number of shots would be greatly increased. Zhen Jin lowered his head again and opened his mouth to suck water. This time, his absorption of water was different from before. He was controlling different organ tissues and different muscle groups. This time, the pool water directly entered his poison sac and did not enter his stomach through his esophagus. This was the acid green lizard's ability to absorb poison. After being stung by the fat ball flying fish, the green lizards could absorb poison from each other to detoxify the poison. Moreover, the poison that was absorbed and stored in the poison sac not only would not harm the other organs in the body, but it could also be synthesized with the acid in the lizard's body to produce an even more intense poison. This situation was not rare in the natural world. After the incident, Sang Su casually mentioned a kind of desert beetle. This kind of beetle preyed on ants and deliberately collected formic acid. When the beetle encountered its natural enemy, the meerkat, it would spray out the collected formic acid and shoot it in the meerkat's face, causing the meerkat to flee in a sorry state. After lying by the pool for a long time without vigorous activity, Zhen Jin felt his body turn cold. The temperature also had a great impact on the lizard's ability to move. This was why the green lizards would rush to the gold stones at dawn every day to use the temperature of the stones to raise their body temperature. After their body temperature rose, they would have more ability to move. Tonight's training is almost over. Zhen Jin finally came to the side of the big trees. Most of the big trees that had fallen to the ground had been corroded, but there were still some treetops and branches left. The corrosive ability of the acid had obviously weakened. After all, under the deliberate control of the needle, the number of consecutive shots competed, but the amount of acid shot out was limited. Although these trees would definitely be completely corroded, Zhen Jin could not wait any longer. He touched the surface of the tree trunk with his right forefoot and activated his heart core. Red light shone, and the red line wrapped around the tree trunk and retracted almost instantly, leaving only some charcoal ash on the ground. Even if the trees were ordinary, they were still living beings. As long as they were living beings, they could be absorbed by the blood core. But there was very little magic energy that could be transformed. After getting rid of all the tree remains, Zhen Jin's heart core did not have the option to become a tree. The acid destroyed the life essence of the trees, so the bloodline absorbed very little. If I directly absorb a large number of trees, I should be able to transform into a tree in the end. It was about time. Zhen Jin returned to the distance, transformed into his human form, climbed up the treetops, found his clothes, and put them on. It was worth mentioning that the hole in the back of his pants had been patched up. ZD had accidentally found it and secretly found Zhen Jin to patch it up for him. Back at the temporary camp. "Master, you're back." When Lan Zhao saw Zhen Jin, his furrowed brows immediately relaxed, and his eyes revealed obvious admiration. Not long after Zhen Jin left, he heard a rumble like the sound of trees falling. Master must have caught some ferocious beasts and fought with them. With such a violent commotion, the ferocious beasts lurking in the darkness must be very scary. But now Master is back and he is unharmed. Even his clothes are not damaged at all, nor is there a trace of blood. Amazing! As expected of someone who has mastered the power of the soul. Even the pitch-black darkness cannot stop Master's footsteps. You know, on this strange island, Master can only rely on the strength of his physical body. If he can really use his fighting aura, what would it be like? Lan Zhao stared at Zhenjin without blinking, and his gaze became more and more fervent. Zhenjin coughed. Is there a situation on your side? With Master's help, the camp is very safe, Lan Zhao immediately replied. Zhenjin nodded, a little unable to stand Lan Zhao's gaze. You stay here and continue patrolling, I'll go take a look at the other side. Yes, Master, Lan Zhao immediately replied. His gaze followed Zhenjin's back until Zhenjin was blocked by the trees. Master went through a fierce battle, but he is still calm and collected. This is the demeanor of a strong person. Or rather, the battle in the darkness just now was just for him to stretch his muscles and bones, Lan Zhao praised in his heart. Chapter 85. The chirping of birds echoed in the forest in the early morning. As Zhenjin and the others approached, a flock of birds flapped their wings and flew out of the branches in a panic. Perhaps it was because it was close to the desert, but there was no morning fog here. The sun shone in the green forest, and the air was filled with a fresh smell. Zhenjin was still leading the way. Although nothing could be seen from the outside, Zhenjin's tailbone and buttocks were still a little numb and sore. His body was very healthy. The injuries he suffered in the desert had already healed before entering the forest. As for Baiya, who was an ordinary person, his broken bones had just recovered slightly. So far, he could not draw a bow. Seems like yesterday's training was a little heavy. Zhenjin pondered. He knew that this numbness and soreness was caused by last night's tail-swinging training. After Zhenjin returned to his human form, although he did not have a tail, the injuries he suffered in his lizard form would still remain on his body in a similar form. Just like when he was injured in his human form, his injuries would not heal instantly because he transformed into other life forms. Using my tail to hit trees and rocks won't hurt me. After all, I transformed into a black iron-level lizard. Looks like I have a problem with the way the lizard tail exerts force. I hurt myself when I was practicing tail swinging. If I didn't have a strong recovery ability, I'm afraid my walking posture would be out of shape. Zhenjin sighed secretly. After entering the forest, it was not convenient for him to practice in the middle of the night. Previously in the desert, the exploration team had arranged for one person to keep watch at night. Now that two people were keeping watch at night, Zhenjin could not leave the vicinity of the camp for too long. If it was too long, it would make the other companions worry and search for him, causing even more trouble. Zhenjin could transform into a spear scorpion and a complete fat ball flying fish. However, last night, he only had time to train the green lizard form. He did not have the time to train the other two forms at all. I'm already familiar with the spear scorpion form. As for the fat ball flying fish, Zhenjin had secretly transformed in the desert long ago and realized that this form was not practical. The fat ball flying fish's strongest attack was to shoot out pitch-black venomous fish bones. However, the prerequisite for such an attack was for the fat ball flying fish to self-destruct. This was a method of mutual destruction. Sometimes, the fat ball flying fish died so suddenly that it didn't even have time to self-destruct. If Zhenjin wanted to use this method, it would undoubtedly be suicide. Other than that, the fat ball flying fish could turn invisible. However, after Zhenjin mutated, he discovered that although the human eye could not see this kind of invisibility, when the fat ball flying fish floated forward, it would open its mouth and croak. If Zhenjin shut his mouth and stopped croaking, he would not be able to exchange air with the outside world and would not be able to float quickly in the air. The croaking sound reduced the value of invisibility to a large extent. Therefore, after knowing this, Zhenjin was not too willing to train his fat ball flying fish form. He had thought about it and felt that the most practical form was still the green lizard form. The green lizard's eyes were a great help to him. As for the green lizard's acid spray, it could be said that it was the most powerful long-range attack that Kingpin had mastered. The acid spray was much more powerful than the wooden darts, and the range was not much different. Zhenjin was especially good at accuracy, and the combination of the two was very powerful. The green lizard form was only at the black iron level, and this was actually an advantage. The silver level spear scorpion form would greatly consume the magic energy in the heart core. In comparison, the black iron green lizard used much less magic energy. This would give Zhenjin more time to fight and practice this form. The black iron green lizard was a regular combat method, and the silver spear scorpion was a trump card that would only be used when facing a strong enemy. This was Zhenjin's plan. He didn't originally think this way. After he could truly control the heart core, he felt more fear, caution, and vigilance towards the heart core than curiosity, exploration, and surprise. He originally did not plan to use the heart core frequently, but after being chased by the fat ball flying fish in the oasis, Zhenjin's thoughts changed. If I didn't have the green lizard's eyes, I wouldn't have been able to discover the fat ball flying fish. If I'm in danger, ZD, Sang-Su, and the others won't be able to survive either. On this island, anything can happen, and danger could arrive at any moment. I clearly have the heart core that can absorb the blood and master some ability to deal with this kind of danger. But because I was cautious and prepared in advance, when the danger comes, I can only wait for death. If this is the result, wouldn't I be too pedantic? With these thoughts in mind, Zhenjin gritted his teeth and decided to use the heart core to prepare as much as possible for himself and for ZD and the others. It was better to be prepared for a rainy day. The complete form of the fat ball flying fish was the result of this idea. When they were in the oasis, Needle Gold secretly killed many fat ball flying fish behind the others' back. Then he collected the complete bloodline and could become a flying fish of the black iron level. Wait a moment. Zhenjin, who was moving forward, suddenly saw something strange and immediately stopped. Everyone immediately tensed up. Ever since they entered the forest, Zhenjin had never taken the initiative to stop. Could it be that he sensed a huge threat lurking nearby? Zhenjin slowly walked to the left, and after a dozen steps, he stopped under a tree. He reached out to touch the bark, and a small piece of it was missing, as if it was caused by a sharp weapon. Zhenjin looked around and quickly found more small traces. Then, his gaze paused, as if he had found something. He went deep into the dense grass, and bent down to pick up a piece of silver armor. The others walked over, and Sang-Su saw the armor piece in Zhenjin's hand, and said in surprise, "This is part of the armor. The material is very high quality, it's top-grade steel." Zhenjin nodded slightly, and continued to search the surroundings. Footprints of different depths, blood stains, fallen trees, and the exposed ground after the grass was completely removed. Zhenjin found more and more traces, but he could not simulate a battle scene. There must have been a fierce battle here. The surviving party purposely cleaned the battlefield, so I can't make more judgments. ZD blinked her beautiful eyes. So, there are people around here. Baiya, on the other hand, asked, "What are they fighting against?" Zhenjin frowned, and his tone was not very sure. It seemed to be a giant beast, bigger than a violent horse and very heavy. Its main attack method seemed to be headbutting. It should be the crowd that won. Magical beasts would not purposely clean the battlefield. Zhenjin made a judgment, but it was a little difficult. "Are you sure it was a human?" ZD asked. Zhenjin shook his head. "I can only judge that it was a humanoid form, but since it could clean the battlefield, and do it so well, it means that they must have high intelligence." After a fierce battle, they still had the strength to clean up the traces, which means that they were not weak. Sang-soo squatted on the ground and touched the footprints with his finger. This battle happened a few days ago. What I am more concerned about is, why did they clean the battlefield and clean up the traces? Sang-soo's question was also what Zhenjin was worried about. Zhenjin and the others were attacked by magical beasts, and they rarely cleaned the battlefield. At most, they cleaned up the bloodstains to prevent the smell of blood from attracting other predators. But this group of people not only cleaned the battlefield, but also did it very carefully. This did not make sense. Using this kind of effort to clean up the battlefield was not worth the loss. Because people would waste a lot of time and stamina, and in the process of surviving on an isolated island, every resource and every bit of stamina needed to be saved. Even if these traces were left, the predators in the forest would have low intelligence and would not benefit from the traces of the battlefield. But this group of people did it. What did they need to guard against? Who were they? Were they the crew of the Pig's Kiss, or the people on this island? Zhenjin looked into the distance, and because he was thinking, his eyes were a little absent-minded. An unexpected situation appeared. Now there were two choices in front of him. The first choice was to follow their original plan and rush to the place where Sang-soo and the others entered the forest. This way they could verify and fill in the map. The second choice was to give up on this plan and follow these traces to approach this mysterious group that suddenly appeared. There were many risks in this. The combat power of this mysterious group was unknown, but it should not be low. Their numbers were unknown, their race was unknown, and their intentions were unknown. Everyone was silent, some continued to observe the traces, while others were vigilant of their surroundings. They were all waiting for Zhenjin's decision. Without spending too much time thinking, Zhenjin quickly made a decision. Give up on the previous plan, we will follow these traces. Be careful. Understood. Bai Yi replied. Yes, master. Lan Zhao said concisely. Sang-soo and ZD both nodded, and no one raised any objections. The five-man exploration team changed their direction and no longer walked along the boundary between the forest and the desert, but officially went deep into the forest. 2 hours later, a river appeared in front of everyone. Zhenjin looked at the gurgling river and could not help but sigh. At this point, all the clues were lost. He originally followed the traces, but the group was cleaning up the traces along the way. They were experienced and ruthless. A few days later, Zhenjin tried his best and could barely identify their previous route. But when they reached the river, the traces left by the mysterious group completely disappeared due to the current. The river flows very slowly, and the riverbed is very low, only reaching the knees of an adult. They stepped into the river here, but they did not directly go to the other side. We don't know if they will follow the river or go against the current to land somewhere. However, this also means that this river is not very dangerous. Zhenjin squinted his eyes and mutated the eyes of a lizard. He found that there was almost no life in the river, at most some small fish and shrimps. Let's continue forward. Zhenjin thought for a while, then led the team across the river to the other side. There were no traces to follow, so Zhenjin followed the direction that Sang-soo estimated. Their destination was the beach where the Pig's Kiss was stranded. About a quarter of an hour later, Jin Zhen was the first to hear the noisy and harsh sound. As the distance shortened, the five of them found a camp in the forest. The camp was surrounded by a row of wooden stakes. The area of the camp was not large, but there was a wooden house in the middle. There were 2 arrow towers in the camp, one was already built, and the other was just beginning to take shape. A group of beasts was wreaking havoc in the camp, and the people in the camp had all retreated to the wooden house in the middle. The situation was not good. Chapter 86. What are these things? I don't know, it's my first time seeing them too. Zhenjin and the rest squatted, using the tall trees as cover, looking at the wild beasts wreaking havoc in the camp from afar. These wild beasts were not big, similar to monkeys. They had purplish-black fur all over their bodies, 2 small black horns on their foreheads, and a pair of broad bat wings on their back. Their claws were very sharp, and when they screamed, their mouths were wide open, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. Some of them flew in the air, sometimes diving down and slamming into the wooden hut. Some of them bounced on the ground and the buildings of the camp, and after landing on the ground, they jumped away, kicking up a cloud of mud and grass. Sang-Soo observed for a moment, then shook his head with a bitter smile. Their horns remind me of demons, but I'm sure that these are not any kind of demons. They look like monkeys, but they have bat wings, so let's call them bat monkeys for now. Zhenjin and the rest frowned. The bat monkey's screams were very sharp and ear-piercing. Previously, the ear-piercing noises that Zhenjin had heard were made by these bat monkeys. There was no lack of bronze-ranked and iron-ranked bat monkeys, but the bat monkeys were flying in the air and did not participate in the attack. It was mainly the ordinary bat monkeys that surrounded the wooden hut in the middle of the camp, scratching and clawing outside, trying to find an opening. The doors and windows of the wooden hut were tightly shut. There was a large chimney in the wooden hut, and at this moment, thick smoke was constantly coming out. If the ordinary bat monkeys tried to enter, they would immediately be choked by the smoke and run away. The bat monkey's attack did not make much progress. What exactly is in the wooden hut? The clean battlefield that we saw before, could it be this group of people? Zhenjin guessed. He did not rush to rescue them. Firstly, it was difficult to distinguish between friend and foe, and he did not know if the people in the wooden hut were friend or foe. Secondly, the situation in the camp was still in a deadlock, and there was no need to act immediately. Thirdly, there were many bat monkeys, and they were constantly jumping and flying, agile and fierce. If they acted and provoked these bat monkeys, Sang-Soo and the rest would be in trouble. The exploration team had a total of 5 people. Other than Zhenjin, only Lan Zhao could fend off a few bat monkeys. Once Bai Ye and the others were besieged, they would definitely be torn to pieces by these bat monkeys. Sir, I think I was the one who built this camp. At this moment, ZD said something surprising. You've been here before? Zhenjin was stunned. ZD shook her head. I led the others deep into the rainforest and found Sir. His Excellency was unconscious and could not be awakened. I decided to set up camp nearby. I planned to recuperate on the spot and heal my lord as soon as possible. At this point, ZD looked at the campsite again and nodded. That's right. I was very impressed with the hut and the camp. For the sake of my lord's safety and for the convenience of future treatment, I wanted to be stationed here for a period of time. Therefore, it took a lot of time to build the wooden house. It is very sturdy. Bai Yu was stunned. Then how did this camp end up here? I know, it's teleportation. It was as if Zhenjin and the others, along with their camp, had been teleported to the desert. This camp abandoned by ZD was also affected by the teleportation and went from the rainforest to the forest. Then, it was occupied by another mysterious group. They repaired ZD's original base and expanded it to build a bigger camp. Bai Ye looked over and nodded. Sir, ZD is right. I also found that the wood used in the hut is different from the wood used in the arrow tower. I am familiar with the wood used in the arrow tower. It is the wood of the forest. Sang-Soo was puzzled. Strange. Sir, ZD built the camp before the teleportation. Now that we know about the teleportation, how could the group in the hut not know? Have they not experienced the teleportation? Or are they not worried about the teleportation? If they were not worried about the teleportation, it meant that this group belonged to the camp of the Sea Island Master. Coming into contact with this group of people was very risky. Zhenjin thought for a moment. The situation is unclear, so we can't act rashly. Let's retreat to a safe distance first, then let me secretly capture a bat monkey. Study this kind of beast carefully. Maybe ZD can concoct a targeted medicine. I will do my best. ZD nodded. Just as she finished speaking, a window in the wooden house was suddenly pushed open. A middle-aged man with a yellow face raised a strange crossbow. He stood in the house and shouted, "Go to hell, you bastards!" As he spoke, his left hand grabbed the bottom of the crossbow, and his right hand grabbed the raised trigger at the back of the crossbow. He pressed down on the trigger, and a short arrow shot out. He raised the trigger, and the crossbow was loaded. He pressed down again, and a second short arrow flew out. In this way, the yellow-faced man kept pressing down on the trigger, and in a short period of time, he shot out more than 10 arrows. "There are people in the hut." Baya saw this scene and exclaimed in a low voice, "Are they people from the Pig's Kiss?" Zhenjin immediately asked. Everyone shook their heads. It could be, but it could also be not. The Pig's Kiss was a large ship that could cross the ocean and connect the two continents. There were many people on the Pig's Kiss, and it was very messy. Sang-Soo, ZD, and the others could not recognize everyone. They have crossbows in their hands. What kind of crossbow is that, to be able to shoot continuously? ZD frowned. Zhenjin's face was serious. The crossbow is good, but the person shooting the arrows is too bad. He does not have any aim, and is only shooting randomly. This is bad. The yellow-faced man was very aggressive, shooting randomly, forcing the nearby bat monkeys to retreat. But very quickly, the bat monkeys counterattacked and swarmed forward. The yellow-faced man saw that the situation was not good, and quickly pulled out the pole supporting the wooden window, and the heavy window closed with a bang. But in this short period of time, the nimble bat monkeys had already entered the hut. The hut was immediately filled with people screaming and cursing. Should we go save them? Zhenjin gritted his teeth and fell into hesitation. Ah, quick, 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 hide! In the hut, a fatty screamed and wanted to hide under the table. It was very likely that because he was too fat, the two bat monkeys had targeted him at first sight. The bat monkey suddenly jumped off the wall, dodging the attack, and charged at the fatty. Just as the fatty hid under the table, he heard a bang, and the thick wooden table was directly smashed into pieces. The bat monkey paused for a moment, and then grabbed at the fatty. The fatty's eyeballs almost fell out. In this moment, he was extremely afraid, and did not even have the thought of dodging. His mind was blank, and he directly sat on the ground like a stone statue. At the crucial moment, a guard bravely stepped forward, and used the long sword in his hand to push back the bat monkey. But in the next moment, the other bat monkey took the opportunity to fly onto the guard's head. Ah! The guard let out a miserable cry. His eyeballs were directly gouged out by the bat monkey. The intense pain made him crazily swing his sword, and his companions who wanted to help were also forced back by the sword. Taking advantage of this time, the bat monkey opened its mouth, and suddenly lowered its head, biting the guard's neck. Poochie! Accompanied by a horrifying sound, the bat monkey fiercely raised its head, and bit a large hole in the guard's neck. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The bat monkey flapped its wings, and a strong lift brought its small body directly to the roof. The bat monkey hung upside down on the roof, and a small part of its windpipe was still outside its mouth. The bat monkey sucked the windpipe into its mouth, chewed it a few times, and swallowed it. Bastard! The people in the wooden house were furious. Finally, there was something to eat, and the smell of blood and meat stimulated the bat monkey to become even more ferocious. They were very fast, and their movements were unbelievably nimble, turning the entire wooden house upside down. The fatty collapsed on the ground, and seeing that everyone was in a mess, and in the blink of an eye, another person had died. He was so scared that he kept shouting, "Save, save me!" The yellow-faced man who opened the window had just raised his crossbow when he saw a bat monkey coming at him. He quickly lowered his head, dodging the bat monkey's dive, and rolled 3 times on the ground in a sorry state. The bat monkey missed its target and hit the ground. It landed on all fours, its 4 claws digging into the ground, and quickly stopped. Then it charged at the yellow-faced man again. The yellow-faced man did not have any fighting skills, and was about to get up from the ground. Just as the bat monkey was about to pounce on his face, a sharp thin sword suddenly pierced out from behind the man. The thin sword pierced the bat monkey's face, and pierced through its skull. The bat monkey's speed was too fast, and in an instant, it rushed from the tip of the thin sword to the hemispherical gauntlet at the hilt, and skewered itself. But the bat monkey was not dead. Under the intense pain, the bat monkey struggled and flapped its wings. The sword-wielding man hurriedly swung his sword, sending the bat monkey flying. The bat monkey landed on the ground and crazily screamed, struggling and biting. After 5 breaths, it collapsed on the ground and did not move anymore. The person holding the sword pulled the yellow-faced man up and was very angry. "Mu Ban, this is all your fault. I told you not to open the window. Isn't it better to wait for Master Shi Suo and the others to come back?" Mu Ban coldly snorted and straightened his neck. "I have a treasure in my hands, these bastards will all die." Saying this, he pulled the trigger again, and shot out more than 10 arrows. There was only 1 bat monkey in the wooden house, and the arrows were very powerful, but they did not hit a single one. Instead, someone was shot in the thigh and angrily shouted, "Mu Ban, you shot me!" Everyone dodged the arrows. Whoosh! An arrow pierced the ground, and the tail of the arrow trembled. The fatty who was sitting on the ground saw this arrow, and then looked at his crotch, which was less than a finger away from the arrow. When he reacted, the fatty cried out and his eyes rolled back and he fainted on the spot. "Mu Ban, quickly stop! Someone come, quickly stop Mu Ban! He is more dangerous than these monkeys." Everyone roared and pounced at Mu Ban with ferocious expressions. Mu Ban quickly dodged, and in his panic, he lost his crossbow. "Kill the monkey, kill the monkey!" Another person shouted. Just now, the remaining bat monkey had injured another person. Everyone's attention once again focused on the bat monkey, and after a round of pursuit, this bat monkey was also killed by the same thin sword. The one holding the thin sword was a young man. He had black hair, black eyes, and his skin was also dark, and his hair had natural curls. "Well done, Hei-wan. I didn't expect you to have this kind of skill." Everyone praised in surprise. Hei-wan lightly snorted, and the thin sword in his hand drew a beautiful sword flower, and just as he was about to put it back into the sheath, he heard a dong-dong-dong sound, as if someone was beating a war drum. "What's that sound?" Everyone listened in confusion, and the sound of the war drum became louder and louder. "Not good." Hei-wan listened carefully, and suddenly realized something, and quickly rushed to the left side. In the next moment, a huge rhinoceros broke through the wooden house, and it was extremely savage and ferocious. Those who could not dodge in time were either sent flying or trampled to the ground. The huge rhinoceros did not stop, and directly broke through the wooden house, raising a huge cloud of dust. Without the wooden house blocking them, the bat monkeys outside let out excited horns, and one after another, they charged at the people inside. "It's over. I'm going to die." Seeing the bronze and black iron rank bat monkeys charging at him, Hei-wan fell into despair. Chapter 87. "No, I don't want to die, I don't want to die." Hei-wan roared in his heart, a strong desire to live filling his chest. He quickly crawled up. Dust billowed around him, blocking half of his vision. His companions' screams and cries for help could be heard. Creak, the roof of the wooden house let out a terrifying sound, and the remaining walls were on the verge of collapsing. "This place is finished. If I stay here, I will definitely die." Hei-wan clenched his teeth, suddenly turned around, bent his waist, and ran out of the wooden house. A normal bat monkey screamed, pouncing down from above his head. Hei-wan immediately rolled forward, nimbly dodging the bat monkey's attack. The normal bat monkey did not continue to pester Hei-wan after its attack missed, and instead rushed into the wooden house. But just as Hei-wan was about to get up, he saw another bat monkey pouncing towards him. Different from the previous one, this bat monkey was a bronze-ranked magical beast. Hei-wan was shocked and quickly pulled out his sword. With a clang, the thin sword at his waist was as fast as silver lightning. The action of pulling out the sword was very fast, displaying Hei-wan's solid swordsmanship. But in such a hurry, Hei-wan was still unable to aim at the bronze bat monkey's vital points. The sharp sword pierced the bat monkey's chest, but it was stuck between the bat monkey's ribs, unable to pierce any further. The bronze bat monkey was injured, and its ferocious nature erupted, using its bat wings to increase its speed, forcing the thin sword to bend into a U shape, its sharp claws clawing towards Hei-wan's eyes and nose. Hei-wan's eyes flashed with a hint of panic, and hurriedly flipped backwards. He pressed his back against the ground, raised his right leg, and fiercely kicked at the bronze bat monkey. The bat monkey was kicked by Hei-wan, but it was not sent flying. Its wings flapped wildly, its 4 claws dancing in front of Hei-wan, almost turning into a black shadow. Compared to the bat monkey, Hei-wan's strength was not enough to chase it away. Hei-wan felt like he was kicking a crazy horse. He kicked a few times, but his boots were scratched by the bat monkey, and his calves were also scratched by its claws. Hei-wan was worried that if this continued, he would be surrounded by even more bat monkeys, and could only grit his teeth and shake his hand, giving up on the thin sword. The bronze bat monkey did not expect that the resistance in front of it to disappear, and rushed past Hei-wan, with the thin sword in its chest, and crashed into the ground. Black Curl took the opportunity to crawl on all fours and dashed towards the forest outside the camp. But to Hei-wan's TTT Black Curl's heart was filled with coldness as a gust of wind approached from behind. His bloodshot eyes revealed a hint of despair. Tee-teet, a small black shadow flew over, brushing past Hei-wan's shoulder. It looks like a dart. The strong air pressure caused a gust of wind, forcing the bewildered Hei-wan to squint his eyes. Then, he heard the mournful screams of the bat monkey behind him. "'Tis someone." Hei-wan was overjoyed. He did not dare to look back, and ran with all his might in the direction where the dart came from. The bronze bat monkey seemed to be heavily injured, and did not show any signs of chasing. Hei-wan ran all the way into the forest, and found a few people standing under a tree. "'Tis not Shi-Suo and the rest. Wait." Hei-wan's eyes lit up, and when he saw the purple-eyed girl, he could not help but reveal a surprised and happy expression. He blurted out, "'Tis Hei-wan." At the same time, ZD saw Hei-wan's face clearly, and said in a low voice, "'Tis a member of the mercenary group I hired. Lord Zhenjin, the people in the wooden house should be from the Pig's Kiss." ZD said to Zhenjin. Zhenjin nodded. "I need to save them as soon as possible. You guys stay here." Zhenjin quickly moved forward, and in a few breaths' time, he was in front of Hei-wan. He quickly sized up the dark-skinned youth. "Can you still fight?" Hei-wan stood in the same place, looking at him blankly, and did not respond for a while. Zhenjin secretly shook his head. "'Tis seems like he's lost his courage." Zhenjin had seen the scene of Hei-wan running away. Immediately, the young knight said to Lan Zhao, "Take good care of him, I'll be back soon." "Yes, master." Lan Zhao immediately replied. "Lord Zhenjin, you must be careful." ZD ran a few steps, her hands clasped in front of her chest, her gaze firmly fixed on Zhenjin, the worry in her heart overflowing with words. Zhenjin nodded to the young girl, and immediately sped up, rushing towards the camp. "Don't." At this time, Hei-wan finally reacted, and opened his mouth to stop Zhenjin. "You're going to die." In the end, he did not say these words, because in the next moment, Hei-wan saw Zhenjin take out wooden darts from his bosom. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Zhenjin threw 3 darts in succession, and 3 ordinary bat monkeys fell from the sky. More bat monkeys rushed towards Zhenjin. Zhenjin's arm trembled, and with a light flick of his wrist, another 3 bat monkeys fell to the ground, unable to fly again. Heiwan's Adam's apple bobbed. Zhenjin's darts were too accurate, and practically every shot hit the target, without missing a single one. A bronze bat monkey landed on the ground, and used both its hands and feet to attack Zhenjin. Its speed was very fast, and what was even more shocking was that it did not attack in a straight line, but instead turned on the ground in a zigzag pattern, attacking Zhenjin. What a beast! Heiwan felt a chill in his heart. Zhenjin's darts were very accurate, and the bat monkey in the air was a live target. But after landing on the ground, the bat monkey could use the ground's reaction force to quickly change directions, increasing the difficulty of Zhenjin's aim by several times. Looks like this bat monkey's intelligence is not low. Zhenjin slowly stopped in his tracks, and did not attempt to throw the darts again. Instead, he quietly waited for the bat monkey to rush over. What is he doing? Hurry up and attack! Heiwan almost couldn't help but shout out. In the next moment, Zhenjin's right hand reached down, and very naturally grabbed the hilt of a thin sword. This thin sword belonged to Heiwan, and it was stuck in the body of the bronze bat monkey, so he had no choice but to give it up. The bronze bat monkey crashed into the ground, and with the thin sword, chased after Heiwan. Then, it was killed by Zhenjin's wooden darts, and this thin sword was stuck in the ground with the tip of the sword pointed downwards. The bronze bat monkey fiercely stomped on the ground, and its small purple-black body was like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, it was less than a foot away from Zhenjin's face. Zhenjin already had a sword in his hand. A light sound rang out. The people in the forest only saw a blur in front of their eyes, and then they saw Zhenjin holding the sword in one hand, holding it horizontally in front of him. The bronze bat monkey's head had been pierced through by the thin sword, and its head hung from the thin sword. It wasn't completely dead, and was about to struggle. But at this time, Zhenjin swung his sword, and the sharp sword flashed in a silver arc in the air. The bronze bat monkey was thrown out, and it fell to the ground. It wanted to get up, but just as it supported its upper body, its remaining strength leaked out like its brain and blood from the hole in its head. In the next moment it fell to the ground, and its eyes were wide open. The shock, disbelief, and fear before its death were frozen on its face. Heiwan's breath stopped. He stared at Zhenjin's back, and also revealed a shocked expression. How can he have such terrifying strength? You can't use battle chi here. Heiwan had fought with the bronze bat monkey before, and he had used all his strength to stab forward, but it had been stuck between the bat monkey's ribs. It was clear that the skull was the hardest of all the bones. Zhenjin's sword had directly pierced through the bronze bat monkey's skull. This kind of strength was simply inhuman. Heiwan. At this time, ZD Lanzeo and the others walked over. Miss ZD. Heiwan collected his emotions and bowed to ZD. This, sir, is... ZD smiled faintly and was about to answer. The usually silent Lanzeo beat her to it. He is my master, Lord Zhenjin. He is Lady ZD's fiancé, the only successor of the 100 Needles clan, a true holy knight, and the future lord of White Sands City. He is my savior, and at the same time your savior. ZD nodded. I hired you to escort me to White Sands City in the Wilderness Continent, and Lord Zhenjin has always been hiding by my side. The goal was to hide from others and prevent competitors from maliciously obstructing our journey. The shipwreck happened, and I found Lord Zhenjin. Believe me, Lord Zhenjin will definitely lead us to leave this island alive. So that's how it is. Heiwan's Adam's apple bobbed as he quickly accepted this reality. Zhenjin had a sword in one hand and a few darts in the other. When the bat monkeys came, he would throw the darts. When the bat monkeys came close, He would use the rapier to reap their lives. He looked like a human, but the arms under his clothes had already transformed into bare arms. His powerful strength and his innate talent made the darts and rapier become the scythe of the grim reaper. The people in the wooden hut were under attack and were in an abyss of suffering. But gradually, they felt the attacks on them lessen. Originally, the entire camp was filled with the unpleasant screams of the bat monkeys. But now, the camp was becoming quiet at a strange speed. "What's going on?" Mu Ban was half lying down, his back leaning against the wooden hut's wall. His chest was covered in blood. Suddenly, he felt someone walk over and looked over. At this moment, the smoke and dust slowly dissipated. Mu Ban saw a young man. He had a head of golden hair, a handsome face, and a noble and elegant posture. He held a sword in one hand and a dart in the other, leisurely and unhurriedly strolling over. The bat monkeys around him were flying in the air or on the ground beside him. They raised their heads and growled, baring their teeth and full of malice. But the golden-haired young man walked leisurely, as if this battlefield was a beautiful garden with a beautiful scenery. A bat monkey became impatient and suddenly jumped out, running on the ground like a wild dog. Whoosh! A dart shot out like lightning, piercing through the bat monkey. The bat monkey died immediately, but because of its great inertia, its corpse rubbed against the ground and moved a long distance, leaving a bright red trail of blood. Zhenjin lightly stepped over the trail of blood and came in front of Mu Ban. Mu Ban raised his head and stared blankly at the young man. Although the young man's clothes were simple and tattered, Mu Ban swore that at this moment, he felt as if he was looking at a noble knight in platinum armor, riding a white horse and a flag fluttering behind him. Chapter 88. Still alive? Zhenjin asked indifferently. Mu Ban nodded. "Lend it to me." Zhenjin looked at the crossbow in Mu Ban's hand. Mu Ban's mind went blank, but his body subconsciously moved. He raised his hands and offered the crossbow. Zhenjin grabbed the crossbow's wooden handle trigger with one hand, while his other hand still held the sword. When Mu Ban saw this, he wanted to say, "This position is wrong, you should grab the bottom of the crossbow with one hand to stabilize it." The other hand pulled the trigger. The next moment, another bat monkey pounced at him. Zhenjin's hand shook slightly, and the crossbow trembled. A short arrow flew out. Poochie! The bat monkey that pounced at him died. Zhenjin's wrist moved, and with a light click, the crossbow was loaded. The bat monkeys screamed again. One of them was quite cunning, and attacked Zhenjin from behind. Zhenjin did not turn his head. He only turned the crossbow around, and with a shake of his arm, the arrow flew out. The arrow pierced the bat monkey's mouth, and the arrowhead pierced through its spine, coming out from behind the bat monkey. The bat monkey knelt on the ground. Following its inertia, it rubbed against the ground and came to Zhenjin's feet. Then, because its body stopped moving, its head, which was originally leaning backwards, fell forward to its chest. It looked like it was using its life to atone for Zhenjin's sins. Offending a superior, offending a noble knight, was an unforgivable crime. Who is this person? What kind of archery skill is this? Am I dreaming? The surrounding people were saved, and they stared at Zhenjin with their mouths wide open. Zhenjin attracted the attention of all the bat monkeys, but every time they attacked, they would fall on their way to charge. Zhenjin stood in the same place, and the number of bat monkey corpses around him increased. The way he controlled the crossbow was very irregular, and he was very free and undisciplined. However, each arrow seemed to have grown eyes as they drilled into the bat monkey's fatal weakness. Even if a bat monkey got close to Zhenjin, the thin sword in Zhenjin's hand would definitely light up with a silvery white sword flower, mercilessly reaping the fiery lives of the bat monkeys one by one. Seeing the bat monkeys suffer heavy losses, the black steel bat monkeys in the air could no longer hold themselves back. It uttered a series of short shrieks. Upon receiving its order, the bat monkeys dispersed. Trying to run? Zhenjin raised his eyebrows slightly. With a flick of his wrist, an arrow flew towards the black steel bat monkey. The black steel bat monkey flapped its wings and dodged the arrow. Then, it took a deep breath, and its chest puffed out in an exaggerated arc. In the next moment, it opened its mouth and screamed. Its voice was extremely sharp, and it actually stirred up waves of translucent sound waves that were visible to the naked eye in the air. The sound waves grew louder and louder, enveloping the entire wooden house. Everyone had a pained expression. They bent their backs and desperately blocked their ears, wanting to isolate themselves from the sound waves, but it was to no avail. Zhenjin frowned. He had an extraordinary physique, but under the attack of the sound waves, he immediately felt a strong sense of nausea and wanted to vomit. After a few breaths, he felt a little dizzy. If this continued, his eardrums would definitely be damaged. The crossbows shot continuously, but the short arrows were either dodged or caught by the black steel bat monkey. The black steel bat monkey, regardless of whether it was its agility or the toughness of its body, was much stronger than the bronze-ranked bat monkeys. But at this moment, Zhenjin suddenly threw a dart. The dart followed the previous wave of arrows and hit the black steel bat monkey's left eye. The black steel bat monkey was heavily injured, and its shrieks came to an abrupt end. It had a dart in its left eye, and fresh blood flowed out, but it did not choose to retaliate. Instead, it immediately turned around and flew away. The rest of the bat monkeys turned around to lead the way, and did not dare to stay any longer. They all fled into the forest in a panic. Very quickly, the ruined camp regained its peace. Half an hour later, a few warriors were scattered around the camp, maintaining surveillance. Some people began to repair the fences and arrow towers outside the camp, and some people propped up pillars to temporarily strengthen the wooden houses. Their gazes would occasionally look at the empty space in the camp, and the people who were close to each other were still discussing in low voices. In the discussion, the words important person, powerful warrior, knight, and noble appeared frequently. A few seriously injured people were lying side by side on the ground, some were looking at the sky, while others were already unconscious. ZD examined their injuries, and thought about how to concoct medicine to treat them. "Doctor, I don't want to die, please save me," a wounded person weakly begged. ZD smiled. "I am not a doctor, I am a pharmacist. Don't worry, your injuries are not fatal. Although your injuries are not light, you stopped the bleeding in time, and your methods of treating your wounds are also very mature. You will be fine." Although she was comforting him, ZD knew in her heart, to treat injuries, one needed to rest, and during this period of rest, it was hard to say what would happen. This was not a safe place. In the process of rest, these seriously injured people could only be taken care of. Not only would they be unable to produce, but they would also consume a lot of resources. These people would be a heavy burden on the team. Sir President? Is it you? Is it really you? A voice came, interrupting ZD's thoughts. ZD turned her gaze and saw a big fat man who was so excited that he was about to cry. "Fatty, are you awake?" ZD greeted him with a smile. Hearing this call, the fat man suddenly knelt on the ground, covered his face with his fat right hand, and raised his head to cry. "Whoa! It's great, Sir President, you are not dead. You are still alive." Tears flowed down from his round cheeks, converging into two broad tear stains. Okay, get up quickly." ZD had to go forward and pat the fat man on the shoulder. "Come with me to pay respects to Sir Needletip." "Sir Zhenjin? Sir's fiancé?" The fat man took his hand away, looking puzzled. ZD explained, "Please don't blame me, Fatty. I hid some things from you." This time, going to White Sand City was not just to prepare for the 100 Needles clan. My real intention was to cover up my tracks and escort Lord Zhenjin to White Sand City in advance. The people that the Hundred Needles clan arranged for Lord Jean met with misfortune on the way. I discussed with Lord Jean and felt that this was a malicious obstruction by our competitors. The city lord election has a time limit. Not arriving at the city within the time limit will cause Lord Jean to lose a lot of points. In order to not let the competitors succeed, Lord Jean used me as a cover, changed his name, followed me, and boarded the Pig's Kiss. So it's like this. Fatty suddenly realized. In the open space in the center of the camp, Jean sat on a wooden stool. Behind him stood Lan Zhao, holding his blade. Jean looked at the crossbow in his hand. This was the crossbow he had used in the previous battle. It was different from a normal crossbow. There was a rectangular arrow box on the crossbow. There was a black number 8 on the box. The box could store many short arrows. The trigger of the crossbow was a wooden handle that extended from the back of the crossbow. By constantly lifting and pressing the wooden handle, one could complete the action of loading and firing the arrow. You designed this? Jean looked away from the crossbow and looked at the opposite side. In front of him was a middle-aged man with a sallow face. There was an injury on his chest, but it had already been bandaged. It was Mu Ban. Mu Ban immediately said, reporting to Lord Jean, "This is the crossbow I designed." "What does the number 8 mean?" Jean pointed at the arrow box. "Your number 8 work?" Mu Ban shook his head. "That's not it. The wood used to make the crossbow was found in this camp. The material is of high quality. It originally had the number 8 on it." After a pause, the wooden board took the initiative to explain, "It's not just this type of crossbow. I can also make other normal crossbows. It's just that I lack a metal crossbow mechanism, so I can't mass-produce it." Jean nodded. The most delicate part of a crossbow was the mechanism. Normally speaking, this part of the crossbow was made of metal. Although the crossbow in Jean's hands had a special trigger, the mechanism was also made of metal. Jean had used this type of crossbow just now. Compared to a normal crossbow, the crossbow had a shorter range and less power. When dealing with the black steel bat monkeys, Jean's wooden darts were effective, but the arrows shot from the crossbow were either dodged or blocked by the black steel bat monkeys. The normal crossbow's firing speed had always been criticized. The crossbow solved this problem, and its firing speed became its biggest advantage. To be able to design such a special crossbow, Mu Ban was undoubtedly a genius. "So, you're a crossbow craftsman?" Jean asked. "Yes, sir. This lowly one, Mu Ban, wants to go to the wilderness continent because I want to show off my skills. Sir, you are my savior. This lowly one is especially willing to work for you." Mu Ban immediately replied, his attitude very enthusiastic. Jean's identity had already spread throughout the camp. The only successor of the Hundred Needles clan, a member of the Temple Knights, and a candidate for the position of White Sand City's lord. No matter which one of these identities it was enough for Mu Ban to take the initiative to seek refuge with him. This was an important person that he could not normally come into contact with. "Very good. Then do well. I look forward to your performance." Jean encouraged Mu Ban while secretly calculating. With a crossbow craftsman, he could mass-produce crossbows. Previously, he had such a thought. But due to the situation at that time and the fact that he could not make metal crossbows, now it was different. He had experienced craftsmen, and he could mass-produce metal crossbows. When ZD was in the oasis, she had collected a large amount of lizard acid. With these materials, he could concoct medicine. As long as he could create molds, he could mass-produce metal crossbows. A crossbow's power is much greater than a short bow, and its range is longer. Even better, a crossbow is suitable for beginners, and a bow requires training. A crossbow requires less training than a short bow and a longbow. The drawback is that the crossbow's firing speed is very low. But as long as you make some crossbows, you can make up for it. The only concern is ZD's reminder. If everyone has a crossbow, it will be a hidden threat to the other members of the team. But Zhenjin thought about himself and his experiences on this island these days. I can mutate now, my strength has greatly increased, and I can deal with stronger threat. Lan Zhao, Baiya, and the others are my most loyal subordinate. Even Plank, Heiwan, and the others have been saved by me. My control over this team is much deeper than before. Most importantly, this island is too dangerous. It will not be easy to leave this place alive. I don't want these people to die because they don't have suitable weapons when they are attacked by the beast horde again. At that time, even if we have a boat, we won't be able to sail it. Thinking of this, Jin Zhen made a decision. Although there were hidden dangers and risks in mass production of crossbows, but in order to deal with external dangers and maximize their chances of escaping, this risk should be taken. Sir, this is Fat Tongue, one of the founding members of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce. This time, we are going to White Sand City, and he will be my assistant. ZD walked over with the fat man. Fat Tongue greets sir. Senior Fatty quickly bowed to Zhenjin with a face full of smiles. He naturally had a good impression of Zhenjin. This was because the alliance between the 100 Needles family and the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce was well known. Although Senior Fatty had not seen Zhenjin with his own eyes, as one of the higher-ups of the Wisteria Chamber of Commerce, he had already read the relevant information and seen Zhenjin's portrait. Zhenjin nodded slightly. Tell me, why are you here? I just heard that you were forced to leave? Did someone start a rebellion? Fatty nodded his head, his face sunk. My lord, it's like this. Stop. Zhenjin raised his hand to stop him. He thought Fat Tongue was nervous, but when he heard the second sentence, he understood that Fat Tongue was stuttering. Zhenjin looked at Muban. You tell him. Chapter 89. The voyage was originally going smoothly, but the ship's disaster suddenly happened. The pig's kiss broke into two halves, but fortunately we were close to the island, so most of us escaped to the shore. We found that the captain was missing, and the first mate was in charge of the situation. Mu Ban explained in detail. What he said was not much different from what Zhenjin had heard from Huang Zhao and Song Su. The survivors gathered on the beach, all wanting to leave this place. No one wanted to spend the rest of their lives on an island. The main problem in front of everyone was food. Therefore, the first mate sent Lan Zhao, Huang Zhao, and the rest of the first exploration team, with the goal of exploring and collecting food resources, preferably a stable water source, a source of meat, etc. Song Su volunteered to join the exploration team. However, this exploration team that carried everyone's hopes mysteriously disappeared. The people who stayed on the beach were even more afraid of this mysterious and dangerous island, and their desire to escape from this place was even more urgent. The ship broke into two halves, and everyone knew that to leave this island, they had to build a new ship. There was no lack of trees, and the desert was surrounded by dense rainforests. However, cutting trees, processing wood, and building ships were all jobs with a lot of labor. The more tired people were, the more energy they used, and the more food they consumed. From the wreckage of the ship, and from the wooden barrels floating on the sea, they did their best to search for every resource they could use to survive. Even human corpses were not spared. However, without a stable source of food from the outside world, even if the food reserves were considerable, they could not withstand the continuous consumption day and night. As time passed, the days of the main group became more and more difficult. The first mate had no choice but to implement a food control, which made everyone unhappy. The lack of food, the hopelessness of escaping, and the heavy work every day caused people to complain. Their emotions were impetuous, and it was difficult for them to calm down. A ship that could cross the continent and resist the attacks of the merpeople in the sea naturally had good fighting power. The The crew members were united and listened to the first mate's orders. Therefore, although the internal conflicts were growing day by day, the first mate still managed to stabilize the situation. Seeing that the food reserves had fallen to the warning line, the first mate had no choice but to form a second exploration team. Someone stepped forward, thinking of the big picture, and took the initiative to join the second exploration team. However, even more people did not want to face the dangers of the jungle alone. If he stayed in the army, wouldn't he still have food to eat every day? The chief mate understood that this could not go on. Most of them were reluctant, and he had to announce the drawing of lots. The result of the drawing of lots caused an uproar. Because very few crew members were chosen, most of them were passengers. This made people very suspicious that the chief mate had secretly manipulated the drawing of lots and was deliberately biased. A new drawing of lots was demanded. The first mate's attitude was very hesitant. Of course, the crew didn't want to explore the dangerous rainforest. The crew members supported the first officer the most, while the passengers on the other side stood on the opposite side of the crew members. In this situation of intensifying internal strife, a sudden incident ignited the entire stalemate. That day I was so tired that I almost fell asleep as soon as I laid on the beach. Late at night, the people around me and I suddenly heard a woman scream. At first, we thought that a bird had been killed in the jungle, but soon after, the first mate's movements became louder and louder. Men's angry roars, curses, and the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. Just as I got up from the straw bed, a sailor with a panicked face told us to take our weapons and go support the first mate. The sailor told me that a group of passengers had suddenly attacked the first mate's tent with bad intentions. Although I wasn't a crew member, because of my job, I had always been with the shipwright Lao Si. Our sleeping quarters were also next to each other. Lao Si and the others naturally stood on the first mate's side. They all picked up their swords and rushed to the tent. I also took a crossbow and followed him. When I got near the tent, I found that there was already a fierce battle there. The attacking passengers had surrounded the first mate's tent. We wanted to rush in from the outside, but we failed twice in a row. Fortunately, during the third time, Lao Si called his silly son over. We all called him Luobao. He was an abandoned baby adopted by Lao Si. He was a hybrid between a giant and a human. He was 3 meters tall and had great strength. He could directly pull a tree out. Luobao listened to Lao Si and used his tree trunk to sweep the passengers. The passengers were unable to resist and were utterly defeated. Just when we thought we were going to succeed, Zhong Gu stood out. He was a half-beast man and the leader of the rebels. He was wearing a thick steel armor, which allowed him to withstand Blockhead's tree sweep. Then, he stepped on the tree trunk and ran all the way. He jumped onto Luobao's body and used his fist to knock Luobao to the ground. Luobao fought back randomly, but it was all resolved by Zhonggu. In the end, Luobao was beaten to the point where he held his head and begged for mercy. Zhonggu defeated Luobao, which meant that he defeated us. He tied the first mate up and gathered everyone to explain the whole story. According to him, the first mate secretly hid food and enjoyed it himself. That night, he also had his eyes on a female passenger. He ordered people to use drugs to bring the female passenger into the tent. However, Zhonggu and the others accidentally discovered her, which led to the fierce battle. We followed Zhonggu into the first mate's tent and found a lot of food that was not in the storage. The female passenger called K Fan woke up, which also confirmed Zhongji's words. After I understood the truth, I decided to stand on Zhongji's side. Most people chose the same way as me. Even the crew members were wavering. With solid evidence, the first mate could only admit to his crimes. Zhonggu ignored the crew members' objections and forced the first mate to death. He relied on his own strength to become the leader of the camp. Zhenjin heard this and nodded. So, although this Zhonggu was a half-beast man, his actions were heroic. What is his relationship with K-Fan? Mu Ban shook his head. The two of them did not know each other. Like you, at first, I thought that since Zhonggu could stand up for a stranger and stand up for injustice, he would be a more qualified and outstanding leader. But then, something strange happened. We were attacked. Almost every night, there were people dying tragically. We examined the bodies and the fatal injuries seemed to be caused by wild beasts. But the whole area around the camp had been cleaned up many times. The camp was on the beach and the surroundings were almost unobstructed. Where did the wild beasts come from? Zhonggu personally led the team to keep watch at night. At first, no one died. But soon, someone was ambushed during the day and lost his life. In the end, Zhonggu is not made of iron. He has to keep watch day and night without rest. The guards formed by the others could not stop the killing from continuing. We were all very afraid. Everyone in the camp was in a state of panic. Rumors spread. One of them pointed at Zhonggu and said that the real murderer was actually Zhonggu. He was a half-beastman and his animal nature was hard to tame. He liked to eat human flesh. If he did not eat human flesh, he would go crazy. Once he went crazy, he would eat human flesh. The mysterious deaths in the camp seemed to be caused by wild beasts, but they were actually caused by Zhonggu. Because he was a half-beastman. I was like most people. At first, I did not believe this rumor. Until one day someone saw a floating corpse on the sea. There was a shortage of food. The person who found the floating corpse was very surprised because he could vaguely see the floating corpse floating over. He had complete clothes on him, so there might be food or other resources. The person who found the floating corpse risked his life and swam a long distance before he finally came into contact with the floating corpse and dragged it ashore. The floating corpse's identity was the captain. There were wounds on his body, penetrating wounds. It was obvious that they were caused by a spear or similar weapon. The captain was assassinated. So, it was very likely that the accident was also a man-made conspiracy. The discovery of the captain's corpse caused a sensation. Third mate Shi Suo was the captain's son. He laid on the captain's corpse and cried loudly. He swore in front of everyone that he would find the captain's murderer and avenge his father. We were also very angry. We all speculated who the real murderer was, why did they kill the captain, and why did they cause the accident. Based on the fatal wounds on the captain's corpse, we speculated who had a spear or similar weapon. No one was more suspicious than Zhonggu. Because not only did he have a strong and thick steel armor, but the most eye-catching thing was the pair of short spears hanging behind him. Even when he fought against Blockhead, he did not use this pair of short spears. Without a doubt, when he held the short spears, his combat power must be very impressive. The captain was black iron level, so was Zhonggu. The crew united around Shi Suo, but everyone knew how strong Zhonggu was. The attacks were still happening, and they were getting more and more frequent. There were people dying almost every day. In terms of food, although the first mate's secret stash was stuffed into the public storage, it could not last long. But he couldn't bear the consumption, so Zhonggu had no choice but to try to form an exploration team. This time, many crew members volunteered to join, and the exploration team was quickly formed. On the day of the exploration team's departure, shipwright number 4 secretly came to me. He told me that it was all Shi Suo's plan. Shi Suo knew that he could not fight Zhonggu directly for the time being, so he wanted to leave with the crew and build his own ship. I knew that shipwright number 4 was the best at building ships, so after thinking about it, I decided to join them. Not long after the exploration team left, Zhonggu discovered that Shi Suo, Heiwan, and I were missing. He knew that he had been tricked, so he immediately led the team to give chase. We ran all the way, and just as we were about to be caught, the world suddenly changed. The surroundings were no longer a rainforest, but a forest. We were sent here by a mysterious force, and then we found this camp. This camp was very strange. The wooden houses were built directly on the ground, without any foundation, as if they were pulled out from the ground by a giant. Shisua was very happy, thinking that this was a miracle. God helped us escape from the cruel and sinister enemy, and even gave us a temporary camp. We repaired the camp and set up camp here. Because the shipwright and I were very happy, the wood in the forest was more suitable for building new ships. After this, we split into 2 teams. Shisua, number 4, and his foolish son went out to cut wood. We continued to build the camp. But we did not expect to be attacked by the bat monkeys. Luckily you saved us. The appearance of a hero is like this. This must be the arrangement of God. Under your lead, we will leave this demon's land. At this point, Mu Ban's tone became fanatical. Chapter 90. Mu Ban's narration was very clear. His psychological impression of Zhen Jin as a hero arranged by God to save them was also very natural. Zhen Jin remained silent. His heart was greatly moved by Mu Ban's last words. If all of this is God's arrangement, then why is there no response to my prayers? As a holy knight, shouldn't I be under the Xingming Emperor's watch at all times? Could it be that the lack of response to my prayers is the Xingming Emperor's arrangement? Or all of this is the Xingming Emperor's special test for me? The magic core in my heart is also part of the test. Wait a minute. You're saying that a few days ago, you were teleported here? Song Su, who was also listening on the side, asked at this moment. Yes. To be precise, it was 5 days ago. Mu Ban replied. Song Su and Zhen Jin looked at each other. They didn't doubt Mu Ban's words. After all, if they lied about this point, it would be very easy to see through. There were still so many people here. Of course, they couldn't rule out the possibility that everyone was colluding, but this possibility wasn't high. The most important thing was that lying about this point didn't benefit them at all. Sigh. Song Su sighed. I didn't expect so many things to happen in the camp after I left. Zhen Jin's face was calm. This is very normal. You and I have both experienced it before. Helplessly watching food run out or under the pressure of death, people will often be driven mad. They will fall into hysteria and do something abnormal. Lan Zhao was touched by these words. He slightly lowered his eyes. Because of the excessive force he used to hold the hilt of his sword, blue veins appeared on his hand. His steady breathing also became chaotic. And a true leader shouldn't be swallowed by his own selfish desires and become a parasite that sucks the lives and blood of his subordinates. The first mate has already received his due. If it were me, I would personally lead the second exploration team into the rainforest to find more food and water for everyone after the exploration team mysteriously disappeared. This is what a leader should do, Zhen Jin continued. Lan Zhao stood behind Zhen Jin and looked at the young knight's back. His dark eyes lit up again, and his breathing became calm again. In front of everyone, Song Su loudly praised, "My lord, I do not doubt your determination to carry out all of this. Your valor and your virtues are the reason why we are gathered by your side, and why we obey all your commands. This island was the land of demons, full of hardships and dangers. Mu Ban is right. You are the hero sent by God to save us. It's just that, Lord Zhen Jin, I'm very worried about something right now." Shisua, the old shipwright, and the others went to cut down wood, and they haven't returned yet. Zhen Jin frowned and looked at Mu Ban. Before they left, when did they agree to return? Mu Ban looked at the sky. According to the agreement, they should have returned to the camp 15 minutes ago. Could it be that they were also attacked by the horde of beasts? Mu Ban's face was full of worry. Don't worry. There's Blockhead. Fat Tongue said. Haywan shook his head and said in a deep voice, although Blockhead has the blood of giants, and his life rating has reached the level of black iron, but he only relies on brute force, and has not practiced any martial arts. What if he encounters the silver rhinoceros that just destroyed the wooden house? Even if there's no silver magical beast, Blockhead's life will be in danger if he is surrounded by a group of bat monkeys. The level of life rating doesn't mean victory or defeat. Lord Jinjin, there's one more thing that I'm very concerned about. Sang Su continued. Why did the bat monkeys and the silver rhinoceros attack the camp? 5 days ago, they were teleported to the forest and began to repair the camp. In the past 5 days, they were attacked by the horde of beasts. Zhen Jin's frown deepened. Sang Su, what you're saying is that if this camp invaded the territory of the horde of beasts, they should have attacked on the first or second day. Delaying the attack until the 5th day, this is indeed very strange. Also, Sang Su continued, why would the silver rhinoceros and the bat horde attack this place together? These are 2 different types of magical beasts. And after the silver rhinoceros crashed into the wooden house, it left the camp. This action is very unnatural. Although there's not enough evidence, I have an indescribable feeling. It's like they're being manipulated by someone. Manipulated by someone? Hearing this, the others couldn't help but look at each other. Could it be that the other side has a beast tamer or a beast tamer? Fat Tongue asked. Sang Su said in a low voice, they don't necessarily need a beast tamer. Actually, wild beasts, even magical beasts, most of them have low intelligence. As long as you're familiar with their habits, you can use them. For example, we can use the feces of high-level magical beasts and place them around the camp to drive away low-level magical beasts. Also, when we fish, we use bait. Don't these all affect the behavior of these wild creatures? Hearing this, Zidi's face changed slightly, a chill rising in her heart. She looked at Jin Jin and called out, my lord, that armor plate. Just as she opened her mouth, Zhen Jin had already taken out the armor plate. Who among you is wearing armor made of this material? Zhen Jin also realized something and asked anxiously. Mu Ban shook his head. As you can see, my lord, this is a high-quality steel. We can't afford to use this kind of high-quality goods. Most of our warriors wear leather armor. Even if we do, it's half a set of iron armor. We don't have this kind of steel armor. It's him. Fat Tongue suddenly shouted, his face full of panic. Who is he? Zhen Jin narrowed his eyes and immediately asked. It's Zhong Gu. Haywan continued his words with a nervous face. On the entire ship, only Zhong Gu has such a high-quality armor. I've seen him wear it many times. When he defeated Zhong Gu, he was wearing a steel armor. This should be the armor plate he's wearing. Impossible. Mu Ban denied. How could Zhong Gu be nearby? We've already shaken him off. No, you were teleported here. Zidi's eyes flashed. Didn't you just say? Zhong Gu was chasing you, and you were suddenly teleported. Zhong Ji's group could also have been teleported. Zhen Jin's fingers rubbed the broken armor plate, his face serious. All the clues showed that Zhong Ji's group was also teleported here. The traces that Zhen Jin saw before were left by Zhong Ji's group. The reason why they cleaned the battlefield was to guard against Shi Suo and Mu Ban's group. It must be Zhong Gu. Haywan suddenly said firmly. The bat monkeys and the silver rhinoceros were also lured here by Zhong Ji's group to attack my camp. Sang Su was slightly stunned. Do you have any proof? Don't forget, he's a beast man. He must have some kind of connection with the beasts. He must have a way to influence the beasts. Haywan said. Jin Zhen shook his head slightly. The blood of beastmen and half-beastmen does allow them to get close to wild beasts, but this doesn't prove that Zhong Gu and his men are the murderers who plotted against the camp. In fact, the penetrating wound on the captain's body is also not enough to prove that Zhong-gu is the murderer. Sir. Hei-wan placed his hand on his chest and bowed to Jinjin. You are indeed a holy knight, always upholding the spirit of fairness. But my suspicion of Zhong-gu is not without basis. He has undergone strict combat training. Hei-wan continued. Everyone looked at each other. Hei-wan continued. Every mercenary or every sailor has undergone combat training. The combat training I'm talking about is not ordinary training, but military training. Believe me, I'm sure that he has served in the military. Only by going through strict military training and serving in the military would he have the aura of a soldier. I'm very clear about this. Zhong-gu is a black iron warrior, his skills are very powerful. I saw with my own eyes how he defeated the blockhead in a few moves, it was very clean. He has fully unleashed his strength. The most important thing is that on this island, we can't use do-chi or magic. When fighting, we can only rely on martial arts and the strength and agility of our bodies. Zhong-gu has the blood of a lion man. His strength, speed, endurance and so on are much higher than us pure-blooded humans. With the armor on his body, he even withstood the blockhead's tree trunk sweep. Everyone, there's no harm in thinking about it. Such a strong person, why not stay in the military? Any military, as long as it's possible, wouldn't let go of such an elite? As long as he serves in the military, his future is very bright. Unless he committed a major crime, and let the military know that he's a cunning and evil person, then the military will expel him. Hei-wan's analysis was quite reasonable. Mu Ban, Fat Tongue and the others nodded slightly when they heard it. In fact, those who boarded the Pig's Kiss at this time of the year and risked their lives to go to the wilderness continent were not ordinary people. Most of them were people who couldn't survive in the Xingming continent, or people who didn't have good lives. They didn't care about the danger to their lives because they wanted to obtain opportunities and benefits from the war. They were adventurers, but they could also be criminals. For example, Bai Yi needed to become a knight. For example, Song Su was a wanted criminal. Even if he was Jin Jin, he still shouldered the mission of reviving the family. Jinjin rubbed the hilt of his sword and fell into deep thought. From Mu Ban and Hei-wan's narration, as well as Fat Tongue's panicked expression, he could see how powerful Zhong-gu was. Zhong-gu was a hybrid between a beast-man and a human. His identity as a half-beastman was not popular in human society. To be more precise, he was discriminated against. However, on the island, his identity as a half-beastman made Zhong-ji's battle prowess stand out. If I don't mutate, I'm afraid I can't defeat Zhong-gu. Only by mutating can I have a chance of winning. But I can't let others see the mutation. Once I use the magic core in my heart, I have to guarantee that Zhong-gu will die. Jinjin felt a sense of pressure. He couldn't use battle chi, praying to the gods didn't get any response, and he couldn't get any divine blessings. He could only rely on his own physical strength. He didn't even know what his cultivation level was. Although his physical fitness was far beyond the standard of an ordinary person, his strength and speed were just so. If it wasn't for the magic core, if it wasn't for some luck, and if it wasn't for Zhen Jin's tenacious perseverance, Zhen Jin would have died long ago. So, my opponent this time isn't a magical beast, but a human? Chapter 91. Most of the time, humans were more frightening than magical beasts. Beastmen were also highly intelligent beings, and they knew how to use strategies. Another thing that worried Jinjin was that Zhong-gu had excellent equipment. He had a high-quality steel armor and a pair of spears. He had never used his spears in public, probably because Zhong-gu was not in danger, so it was not worth it to use them. Zhen Jin's intuition told him that Zhong-ji's spears were not ordinary, and they were of a higher grade than his steel armor. In comparison, Zhen Jin only had a thin sword in his hand, and it was He Wan's. No matter what, we must first search for Shi Suo and the others, and bring them back safely. Zhen Jin sorted out his thoughts and immediately made a decision. Shi Suo was the third mate, and the fourth shipwright was proficient in the process of shipbuilding. These were all key talents. In order to leave this island, they were very important. Lan Zhao, He Wan, you two come with me. Zhen Jin looked around and pointed at two people. Although he wanted to act alone, considering the possibility of searching for Shi Suo and the others in the forest, Zhen Jin still needed manpower. If he were to search alone, the efficiency would be too low. Whether it was Lan Zhao or He Wan, they both had the strength of a bronze rank. Catch! Zhen Jin raised his hand and threw the thin sword to He Wan. He was a temple knight, and he definitely would not covet other people's equipment. The sword is not bad. Zhen Jin also praised He Wan. He Wan took the sword and was about to speak. Sir. ZD suddenly opened her mouth and said worriedly, if Zhong Guo is the culprit behind the horde of beasts, then he was disturbed by Lord Zhen Jin and chose to temporarily give up on attacking the camp. But since he already knows of Milord's bravery and valiance, wouldn't Milord also be under his observation when you head to the forest? Could this be a ploy to Zhong Ji's division of forces to lure us in? That's possible. Zhen Jin frowned. So, what do you think? ZD said. I want to go with you, sir. I will do my best to help you. At the same time, I have medicine to protect myself. I will try my best not to be a burden to you. Zhen Jin hesitated. ZD turned around and said to He Wan, He Wan, I know that your sword is not ordinary. Please give it to the Lord Zhen Jin to use for the time being. He Wan was stunned and his expression changed slightly. This sword is my family heirloom. He Wan expressed his refusal. He was only a mercenary hired by ZD. He was not ZD's subordinate, nor was he Zhen Jin's retainer. Zhen Jin smiled faintly. ZD, there is no need to make things difficult for him. Zhen Jin could mutate a silver spear scorpion. The spear scorpion's tail should be able to pose a threat to steel. Sir, you can't do that. ZD was very insistent. We just analyzed it. Zhong Guo is a very strong opponent. He also has a set of high-quality steel armor. His spear must be extraordinary as well. Sir, if you use a normal weapon to fight Zhong Guo, it would be no different from being unarmed. But if you fail, sir, the fate of all of us will be very worrying. Sir, if you don't want to think about yourself, please think about us. Zhen Jin was stunned. He immediately laughed bitterly. He understood that ZD's words were said with good intentions. Bullying Zhen Jin was a knight who pitted the weak and protected his comrades. But at the same time, Zhen Jin had to admit that ZD's words were reasonable. He had confidence in his own mutated strength. But if they were to fight in public, he could not recklessly use his heart nucleus. Especially now that there were many people around, it was not like a five-man team. Zhen Jin could not afford to be careless. Sir. Just then, He Wan took the initiative to hold the thin sword in his hands. He walked forward and cupped his hands. This lowly one is ignorant and narrow-minded. This sword can only display its true value in Sir's hands. This is my family heirloom. The name of the sword is Silver Lightning. It will definitely be able to release its radiance in Sir's hands. ZD smiled. He Wan, for this employment I will pay you double. He Wan's face immediately revealed a smile. All right. I will treat this sword well. I will do my best to return it to you in one piece. Zhen Jin saw He Wan's attitude and generously took the sword back. He abided by the creed of the Knights Templar, but he was not pedantic. Since he could secretly use his heart nucleus, many times for himself and for others, borrowing a thin sword was naturally not a problem. He had already used it and carefully observed it before. The thin sword was indeed a good sword. He Wan said that it was a family heirloom, and it was not an exaggeration. To almost all warriors and knights, armors and weapons were very expensive, and could be passed down as legacies. Because of the expensive equipment, many lords only provided food and fodder when they recruited knights to fight. They did not provide weapons and horses because they would not be able to afford it financially. Of course, weapons and equipment also had grades. There were many factors to evaluate whether a weapon or equipment was good or bad. One of the most important factors was the conductivity of the douqi. Zhenjin did not know how well the silver lightning thin sword could conduct douqi, but just by looking at its hardness, sharpness, and flexibility, it was already outstanding. After a short discussion, Zhenjin set out with Zd, Heiwan, and Lan Zhao. He couldn't possibly bring everyone with him. Many of his heavily injured companions had to stay in the camp to recuperate. Sang Su, Mu Ban, Fat Tongue, and the others stayed behind. They really did not have much fighting power. If they were to go to the battlefield, they would be a burden to Zhenjin. Mu Ban strongly wanted to participate, but he was rejected by Zhenjin. Zhenjin also took his repeating crossbow. If it was left in Mu Ban's hands, his companions would be in more danger. If this was Zhong Ji's plan to divide the troops, then once the camp was attacked, Mu Ban would fire a signal flare. At that time, Zhenjin would quickly return to reinforce them. There was no other way. Zhenjin could not give up on rescuing Shipwright and the others because of a conspiracy. As for the signal flare gun, not only did the camp have it, Shisua also carried one with him. Shisua and the others were at the logging site southeast of the camp, on a hillside 2 kilometers away from the camp. Zhenjin and the others had just walked halfway when they heard a gunshot from the hillside. A pink signal flare rose into the air. This is a distress signal. They are really in danger. Let's go. Zd whispered. Not necessarily. We still need to be careful. Maybe the enemy deliberately released this bait to lure us to move faster and lower our guard against the surrounding environment. Heiwan said. You guys maintain your current pace. I'll go take a look at the situation first. Zhenjin ordered and immediately sped up. Although Heiwan's words made sense, it was related to the old shipwright's life. Without him, the others in the camp would not be able to make a large ship that could cross the ocean. This could be a trap set by Zhongguo, but it could also be something else. The faster Zhenjin acted, the higher the chance of saving Shipwright's life. The young knight's pace became faster and faster, and he began to run in the forest. His heart core activated, and his right eye quietly transformed, forming a thermal vision. This way, even if Zhongguo and the others were to ambush him, Zhenjin would be able to discover them in time. Very quickly, Zhenjin heard the unique sharp cries of the bat monkeys. He sped up again, almost running madly in the forest, and finally saw the hillside. The hillside was not steep, and there were many people surrounded by the bat monkeys. This group of bat monkeys was clearly not the group that attacked the camp before. There were 7 bronze bat monkeys and 1 black steel bat monkey. The crew members that were constantly being attacked by the bat monkeys were all injured, and were in a precarious situation. Zhenjin did not stop, rushing towards the hillside while pulling the trigger of his crossbow. Short arrows flew out with incomparable accuracy. Ordinary bat monkeys were shot one by one, like penguins lining up to fall into the sea, falling to the ground one after another, and the sound of the arrows did not stop. Someone came to save us. Everyone cheered. The bat monkeys were enraged, and a few bronze bat monkeys pounced at Zhenjin. Zhenjin put away his crossbow, and with a clang, he pulled out his thin sword, Silver Lightning. The distance between him and the bronze bat monkeys quickly shortened. In that instant, Zhenjin suddenly threw out a few resplendent silver lights from the thin sword. Following that, he passed by these bat monkeys. The bronze bat monkeys seemed to pause in the air, and then they all fell to the ground, their life aura quickly dissipating. Zhen Jin's battle strength had momentarily stunned the crew members on the hillside. The only black steel bat monkey was enraged. It flapped its wings, puffed up its chest, and suddenly screeched. The screeching sound caused ripples in the air, expanding in circles, and quickly enveloping Zhen Jin. Zhen Jin had already seen this kind of special sound wave attack, the mutated bare arm, and instantly threw out a dart. The dart hit the black steel bat monkey, and pierced through its left wing. The black steel bat monkey was frightened, and with the few remaining bat monkeys, they ran away in all directions. Zhen Jin did not chase after them, and rushed to the hillside, where he saw the leader of the crew. The leader was a young man, with a tall and thin figure. "You are Shi Sua?" Zhen Jin asked seriously. The young man quickly nodded. "May I know who Sir is? Where is Shipwright Lao Si?" Zhen Jin looked around and immediately asked. Shi Sua quickly pointed in a direction. "We were attacked by the bat monkeys." Blockhead was very angry and rushed out. Old Shipwright was worried about Blockhead's safety, so he brought a few people and rushed over. Zhen Jin gritted his teeth and rushed in the direction Shi Sua pointed in. The traces along the way were very obvious. Zhen Jin quickly found his target on another hillside. A 3-meter-tall giant was crazily waving a wooden club in his hand. This giant had a young face, his upper body was exposed, and his lower body was covered with a yellow leather skirt with black spots, and he wore a pair of large straw sandals. His hair was disheveled, and he constantly shouted, spittle flying everywhere. "Die, even flies want to die. This big guy will smash you all." The giant continuously shouted. The wooden club was heavy, and could easily smash boulders and trees, and when it fell on the ground, it would create a small hole, and mud would splatter everywhere. A few people surrounded the little giant and shouted, trying to calm him down. But the giant was completely enraged by the bat monkeys, and did not listen to them. "Old Shipwright is over there." Zhen Jin's pupils slightly dilated, and saw an old man lying at the giant's feet, between his legs. This old man's clothing and appearance was very similar to Mu Ban's description, but his eyes were closed, and it was unknown whether he was unconscious or dead. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.